anytime.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people, but you don't hear much. But for somebody to actually send an email about what happened, and they're not from here, it's kind of funny.
Not a report, just something with an issue. I got contacted by a citizen at Angel Street where Case Creek Park crosses it. There's no crossing or sign for trail crossing. And I know it's not used a lot, but this was, I thought it was someone that uses the trail that was calling me, but actually it was someone that drives Angel Street often. Said several times they've seen people waiting and they're not sure if they're safe to go, but do you know where I'm talking about?
No, you said Case Creek Park?
So Case Creek Trail, so right by Case Creek.
Right by Hill Farms, Phase 7 on Angel Street.
Right,
Alex.
yeah, just the west side of Hill Farms.
Okay.
That's on Angel Street. Just, I don't know if the trail crossing sign or striped without, or if it's something feasible.
We'll look at it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll get a look at it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Just got one item, Alex, if you could pass a thank you to whoever, the crew that took care of that park strip over by the, what's that, Fairfield before you hit church. What the city property is, the planted trees and
That was our
bushes
cruise.
and, who was that? Who was that?
That was our cruise.
There we go. It was unruly, now it's back to beautiful, so, thank you.
It's got Public Works' name.
Well, it's beautiful.
Better than what it was.
Yeah, their crew was out, like, okay, all right, so, thank you.
Pass the word.
Thank you.
I just think of one other, I just left Davis Arts Council, and while the summer concert series are pretty much sold out, I think except for 3. The free concerts on Sunday, the attendance has been way down, and then also the Friday night films, which I think will pick up now that the fest has started back up. But I'll announce it out there, but just so you all know, kind of let people know that the concerts on Sunday nights are free.
So you'll do fest, and then you mentioned the film. Okay,
Sure.
all right, that works. Okay. Anything else? Okay. All right, well, let's go ahead then and jump into our agenda items for the work meeting, which Mr. Garside's up first.
So as we acquired property to extend,
Sorry.
no,
No?
it's all right, it'll work.
More.
Then go ahead and go back to the other one, we can work with that one, okay. So again, to the right of the map is 2200 West, and as we acquired this property to extend Layton Parkway, the property owner didn't want to be left with a strange configuration of property and asked us to acquire all of that. And so that's shaped in somewhat of a wedge, almost looks like a doorstop there, is the property that we have. And as we looked at the best way to do that now that the project is nearing completion, we looked around, we met with Chad and his folks, and determined that the best use of that property along that roadway would be to assemble it with property. And so as we looked at the adjoining property owners, the Joseph Hill Family Trust owns the property to the south. Now that line that goes across there is a North Davis sewer easement. And so even though that would sever the property, it would still be developable. And so we looked on whether there would be, the best configuration would be that. And so we've been in contact with the Hills, and we have shared with them the appraisals of the property, and they are willing to acquire the property at the appraisal price. The contract that you have, the primary terms of that contract will remain. The only adjustments that might happen is that there is an easement along the west side as well as the east side of the property that they're going to take. And so the location of that resulting easement as far as on which property it will be is still something that's under negotiation. And so again, the general part of the contract will remain the same. There may be some minor adjustments with regard to the square footage depending on the final location of those easements. And so this resolution will authorize staff to complete those negotiations and also authorize the mayor to execute the documents necessary to do this. Under our ordinance as well as state law, whenever we dispose of property, we need to go through this process for obvious reasons, since we hold property in trust for the public. Any questions on that? And we're still working with the property owners next to 2200 West as far as those remnant parcels that are adjacent to those. Those negotiations are going well. Those properties, because they're considered insignificant parcels, because they're not developable, we will not have to go through the public hearing process, but obviously the city council will see those contracts as well.
You're speaking lot 1 and lot 2 on that map, the very south.
Yes, actually, the first 4, they're right next to
Oh, okay.
2200,
All
1, 2,
four.
3, and 4. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you guys have any questions on this? I know we went into depth with it last time and kind of looked at kind of different options, so I don't know if you have anything more or need clarification on it.
Just residential, like what's it zoned right now?
It's actually, you want to talk about you actually met with the Hills as far as the possibilities there.
Yeah, right now, everything out there is ag, so there'd have to be different zone changes that would have to occur for them to develop. But we can still tie those to those other parcels in the back and it'll be just fine. It's all ag zone, it's been ag for a long time.
And the general plan has it as?
General plan has it as business park for the most part. There's some of that area over there that's also on the edges is single family, but for the most part, business park.
Yes, it's clear.
All right, thank you.
No comment, means we're done with that. All righty, well, we'll go ahead and move on then to number 2, which is the general plan amendment, and Chad's gonna talk about the rezone request.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Just as general background, before we start talking about, there's 2 of these requests. They're both in the accident potential zone. Just want to give some general background that as we go forward, we'll apply to both of these. First of all, we know that these are important issues. We know that whenever we have private property, that these are important issues to the landowners. We take it very seriously. This is not something that we take lightly. As we review these zone change requests and applications for general plan amendment, we know that there needs to be a compelling public interest for us to restrict uses or to recommend denial of zone changes. And in this case, there is a very compelling public interest, and that is protection of the continued functioning of the Hill Air Force Base and support of their mission. And that's something that's been talked about in general plans for Layton City for many, many, many years. Not just the recent conversation, but for decades. To that end, state and federal government have even gone so far as to enter into private contractual agreements with property owners to further restrict uses. So this is something that's not a new issue. It's been going on for a long time. The city's been grappling on how to balance that compelling public interest with those property owners that are within that area, and it's a tough issue. So we don't want to make it sound like we take this lightly at all. In no way do we. With that being said, there are some documents that guide the development within this area. I'm going to leave our lands here and get some maps up here. So this area that's outlined here in red on the map is that accident potential zone. There's also a crash zone a little closer to the runway, but that area that extends out past, it includes both Fort and Fairfield Lane, and then past Antelope Drive there on the south portion of that. So this is the accident potential zone. We're gonna have 2 different requests in that area. And the land use in that area is really guided by 2 documents. One is the general plan. The general plan's been around for a long time, like I said before. It's been around for decades. There's been discussion of how to best protect the function and the continued operation of the base in that document for many, many, many years. It has been most recently updated in 2019, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Second document's a little newer. As you're aware, earlier this year you adopted the compatible land use plan. That was the culmination of an effort of a few years with multiple jurisdictions that surround the base, that have interest in the base, not just Layton City, but other surrounding cities, and also some of the areas close to our our test range out there in the West Desert. So big effort, lots and lots of public input opportunities and other opportunities for people to give their concerns. The culmination of that again was the adoption of that compatible land use plan earlier this year. The city, as part of our adoption of that, committed to a good faith effort to try to implement the components of that plan. Both the general plan and the compatible land use plan are advisory documents. They contain recommendations for development within these areas. Neither of those documents changed the zoning of any property. Those zone changes have to come through a legislative process, which is what we're doing tonight. This is why you're considering this tonight. Zoning has to be changed by legislative action of the governing body, which is who you are. This is why it's before you tonight. So that is just a general background that applies to both of these zone changes and general plan amendment requests. I'm going to get into some detail for the first one, which is the Adams Love Rezone General Plan Amendment, and then some further details as we talk about the other one. But again, this first one is 320 East Antelope Drive approximately. The request is to go from A to M1. That's the zone change request. It would go from an agricultural designation to a manufacturing designation on the general plan. About 4 acres in size. Here's a little bit closer shot. The parcel's outlined in red. Again, the existing zone is an ag zone. A couple of the surrounding uses of note. You've got the city shops here to the south, some existing storage units here to the east, so various industrial uses to the north, right there at the intersection of Fort Layton and Antelope. Back to the general plan. This is an area that, for a variety of reasons, but largely because of previous development patterns and also because of its location somewhat on the periphery of the accident potential zone. In the general plan, this was an area that was designated as an area that could be considered for, again, changes to an industrial type use, light manufacturing type use, or M1 zone. That was identified specifically in that general plan document. So staff, as this came in for review, we were open again because of this general plan direction to a change to this M1 zoning. Now, I'm going to back up just for a moment. We had a previous application for this property. Some of you may have seen the notice signs that was to go from A to CP2. The intent of that zone change was to be able to construct a gas station on the property. In addition to the APZ concerns we talked about, that compelling public interest there's also a drinking water well located on the shops property, the public works property here. We also had some concerns about that and protection of that well. So in our discussions with the applicant, we indicated that we had concerns, that we would be okay with a zone change to M1 if we were to have some restrictions that would not allow for a gas station use there because of our concerns about contaminating that drinking water well. So this went to the Planning Commission with that first CP2 request. The Planning Commission did not vote in favor of it. The applicant subsequently amended their application from a CP2 zone change to an M1 zone change with some requests that would be allowed in the M1 zone. They are commercial land uses, but they're allowed in that M1 zone for potential car wash, one of these soft drink type businesses, drive-through soft drink business, and then also for a landscape contractor yard. All those would be allowable uses in that M1 zoning district. With that being said, this is a property that is also subject to an easement that was purchased. I can't tell you if this was a federal or state easement off the top of my head, but there is an easement that applies that limits those uses. This has been reviewed by Hill Air Force Base, and they have said they're comfortable with the uses that have been proposed, which again exclude the use of the property as a gas station. Now that gas station use, the prohibition on that has been worked into a development agreement. We would, as part of this approval tonight, that development agreement would also be approved by council. That would restrict that future use, so we would never have the possibility of a gas station on that property. So with that background, this was reviewed by the Planning Commission. They did forward a positive recommendation to the council to approve this zone change and general plan amendment from agricultural to manufacturing and from A to M1 with the approval of a development agreement to restrict that gas station use. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on this one before we move to the next one.
Any questions, you guys?
I have questions. I'm just getting to them.
Okay, well, she's pulling those up. I'm just gonna go back to the conversation before on an M1 that we had with the previous owner on a different piece of property. And the fence became the issue as far as making sure that any of the outdoor storage for landscaping was compliant. That applies here as well. Who's ever,
All the
Are they
buffer
aware of
standards would apply, yeah, that's gonna.
so, but
that'll
has
be
that
part of the future.
conversation been had though with the owner so they know?
We've had the conversation that all the standards of the zone would apply. We haven't gotten into specifics about fencing and things because we haven't seen the site plan yet. But those are the kind of things that would apply to this. And it depends on what the adjacent use is, the adjacent zoning. We had some residential, as you remember on that one, that had some reasons for buffering. Sometimes when it's industrial to industrial use, there's not as much of a buffer requirement. But we will review that in detail when they come in for their use permits. It's either going to be a site plan review or a conditional use, depending on which of those specific uses that we're looking at. So the planning commission or staff will review that depending on which of those uses it is.
Okay, so my first question is regarding the general plan amendment. So I pulled up the current plan and then also a future map. It actually looks like that little corner is still green, and that green to me still showed as ag, but you're showing it now that it is okay to be M1, but we still have to make an amendment. So
That's what that amendment does. It changes it from that agricultural designation to that manufacturing. So that's the purpose of that. We're going to change that tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have this that we would be, we're going to be looking at amending the general plan to allow for M1 in this area, but currently that's not the case, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's currently general plan for agriculture. Yeah.
And then my second question is, in our documents, it was identified that the car wash and potential drink shop would require a conditional use permit for the zoning. My concern or my question around that is with the cup, as well as the APZ easements and whatnot, there's a limit to the number of people per acre, per whatever the spaces are that can be there. And so is this conditional use permit related to that, or is it related to something else? What is the conditional use permit for those two businesses?
So the easements, again, are something that was recorded by the state or federal government that have limits on the number of people that can be on the property. That'll certainly be part of our review of the conditional use permit. However, it's not part of the city's land use ordinance, so we have had conversations with the base, we'll continue to have conversations. They will ask us to at least inform the applicant that those limits are there, but they do feel comfortable that those limits can be met for both of those uses based on their existing easements.
And then lastly, on the contract and landscape, is that a landscaping company or is it a landscaping yard? Like, what is that exactly?
It could be a yard. Yeah, that would be something that would be allowed under an N1 zone with proper screening and those types of standards that protect adjoining uses, but it could potentially be a storage yard for equipment and landscape materials.
But not necessarily a landscaping business.
Well, again, we anticipate, based on the applicant, that it would be a landscaping contractor business, which would potentially include a yard for storage, yeah.
I think it's not intended to be a retail nursery.
Not a nursery, but a landscape
I
contractor
know you're
business.
asking, they're gonna be selling products and.
Thank you, yeah.
Yep, that's what I'm asking. I could go on, but okay. And lastly, I guess, as I said already, but things keep coming up. Is there? Well, I'll hold off because I know that without having an actual site plan and knowing what the plant looks like, then there hasn't been any traffic studies or any of those things connected to what this owner potentially wants to do with the area. But I would just want to submit that, in the event that this goes through, all of those things need to be addressed for that location in that area, because a drink shop, a car wash, those are potentially, high traffic places.
Certainly, yeah, any traffic study that would be required will be required. I'm imagining that those two uses would require some type of traffic
They
study.
might trigger a lower end level study, yeah.
Any other?
She asked mine.
You should have done.
I have the same concerns about retail in the zone, reading the letter to Weston, I think it was to Weston that was in the packet from the base representative, they set those parameters of how many people per acre, per quarter acre, and when I drive past a car wash on a busy car wash day or a drink shop any day, I see a lot of people in the queue, waiting to enter, so I question those, whether they can meet those parameters. It's my only concern.
Yeah, thank you.
I make a correction. The drink shop's out.
Okay.
We're not gonna do the drink shop.
Zach, did you have a question?
The base does not have any land use authority,
That's right.
but they purchase easements to restrict use that would be of a land use variety. This just is bizarre to me. And then they issue advisory opinions saying, here's what we think you guys should do or shouldn't do, but take it as you want it, but it's really all a matter of having it all in a grand scheme. We don't want that entire area to be developed. But it's up to the individual decision makers, us, to make those decisions. It's just a bizarre thing. Only the federal government could probably get any more entangled than that. And so it's hard for me to, it's hard to separate, I think, this issue and the next rezone. It's because they're in the same area. They're, for all purposes, asking for very similar things, except staff is recommending approval on this one, but to deny the next one. And so I kind of wanted to wait until, I have some questions, but I'd like to hear what the staff has to say about the second one. And then I think I have some questions I'd like to ask just to get some clarifications.
Can I just make a quick comment about that? 'Cause, we've talked about this a lot, and you understand, you hit the issues right on the head. But there's two different things operating here. One is the police powers that a jurisdiction has to be able to create ordinances and a master plan and to do its planning. And then the other aspect of it is entirely private, even though they're dealing with a public entity, which is the base. But a very similar process that takes place happens when CC&Rs are set in place over a subdivision. So you got a subdivision that is zoned a certain way, and you got a set of CC&Rs. The CC&Rs may be more restricted than the subdivision, or than our ordinance, or they may be more liberal. I've noticed a set of CC&Rs that would allow a full-size garage in the rear yard, whereas our ordinance allows it only to cover 25%. So the police powers that the city has are for a totally different purpose than, they're for the planning of the city and the arrangement of the city and what is in the best interest of the way land use is laid out in the city. Whereas these private agreements, and I call them private even though they were made with the state of Utah and the federal government, that's what's confusing here, is that your private party on the other side is a private, it's a public entity. And so there's a difference, and the more restrictive essentially governs, right? If you got restricted covenants in a jurisdiction, those will govern if they are more restricted than the ordinance. But the ordinance always is the master.
It's just all these APZ cases and discussions have always felt like the government, the federal and the state government, are wanting the city to do their dirty work. We have the land use authority. We're the people who have to make the decisions. But then you have this, I don't know what side of the shoulder it's on, but telling us we're advising you not to do this, and they hold over our head the CUP, saying you guys need to do this in good faith and make these decisions, or the base could be at risk or something like that. And I don't know. That doesn't seem in good faith to me. So I guess maybe I just understand where a lot of these property owners APZ, I understand where they're. It's put up easements that are created or purchased decades ago are still running with the land, right? And now things have changed, even maybe property owners have changed, but the rules are still the same. And so it's just a complex issue. So I'm just interested to hear what you have to say about the next one, because I think that the two issues are actually quite similar. At least that Clint and I, or Councilman Morrison, and we were talking about this earlier, that it's just a tough decision. These are tough decisions. There's balancing interests.
Can I just point out one other thing, and that is that you're not expected to make decisions any differently than you would normally
Right.
on a zone change. You look at the surrounding uses. This just happens to be a really big surrounding use. You know what I mean? And you make a decision based on access. You make a decision. The zone changes, access, utilities, surrounding uses are a critical piece. Timing is another critical piece. For example, I know that the base alignment, the easements and that type of thing changed over the years, especially the noise factor, where the noise is and that type of thing. Those things are going to change over the years. So changing circumstances are all the things that you look at in a normal zone decision. This is just tougher because it's so big.
Yeah.
And it's so grand, and I don't disagree with you that often the state has us making the tough decisions. We've seen that.
I guess it's just I just distinguish because if they're doing a zone change in my backyard, I'm not in the APC. There is no Hill Air Force Base is not involved in that conversation. They're not giving advisory opinions and not sending our staff emails about what they think is good and what they think is not. Because it may be advisory, but we all understand the power and the leverage that comes with being a Hill Air Force Base. And what that comes, and when we're making decisions here, it's based on what's best for the city, and what's always best for the city is going to be making sure Hill Air Force Base is happy. But also, people who actually live here are actually residents whose property rights are being, I wouldn't say infringed, but there's a difference between this property right. Because the base is involved. So we aren't going to make everyone happy, and that's not the point. It's just these are complex issues because we want to make sure we're doing what's right for the city as a whole. And that's on to you.
No, I agree. We chatted about this, but if you took that crosshatch there, and this would be much easier if it was all red. Can't do anything. And here we are talking about potential, and we want to approve. We agree. The city agrees. The staff agrees. Yep, approve this one, and the next one we'll deny that one. And I'm looking at the map, and I'm looking at those gray areas, thinking, well, either they had great timing, or they had a great council, or they had a great something happened that the rules were the same, the easements were still the same, yet we have that gray area. We've got and maybe this is for the next item, but this one here. Where we split it, remember, half of it was storage units because it was in the APZ, and the other half was RV park because you could have an RV park because it's not in the APZ. And so I look at these decisions and think, wow, we ought to be some consistency in the logic. That's where I am. So maybe we can, with the next.
Just at the time, and there's never going to be consistency in the logic of elected officials by purpose, right? And because you're one elected body can be bound by the decisions retroactively or prospectively. Each body has to have their own ability to make those judgments. So I don't know if the staff can speak directly to that issue about why there was a decision by a council 18 years ago, 20 years ago to bifurcate or split or do, but I don't think that the...
Well, Alex, this one was just recent, because I was on the planning commission for that one. We went up there.
The zone change was a little while ago, but the use was recent.
So yeah, so I'm just, that's the example that I remember because I was here and the conversations and the APZ being bizarre and being able to get around it by, well, we'll just put storage units, we can get around it, sort of a conversation.
Yeah, I don't specifically know the timing of that, so that's a good point. I think generally, from a staff perspective through the years, again, recognizing the impacts like Gary talked about, this is different, but it's not that different, at least in my view, from other impacts. Whenever we're doing it, as Gary said, a rezone, you're looking at what is in the surrounding area, and it may be a geological hazard, it may be a natural hazard, it may be, there's all kinds of things that go into informing the decision of the council and the recommendation of the staff as to whether it's good to change. We don't put residential right next to heavy industrial. Well, why? Because there are impacts that are associated with that. Some of those impacts are pro, some are con. We don't allow people to put subdivisions on hillsides that have potential to slide. Even if the owners say, we think we should be able to do this, we look at the surrounding areas and say, well, it doesn't make any sense, it's not wise to do that. We, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's every decision, as Gary was saying, it's not that much. You know, we do have an interest in the base, but the staff has an interest and the city does, in the best and highest use of all the property. So we don't think there's one thing that trumps everything, but there have been those private arrangements, whether they're appreciated or not, that exist. The rights have been purchased in the property, and there isn't an ability to parlay what was or was not done years and years ago between property owners and these private parties, the federal government, or the state government, into 2022, and suggest that there are some rights that they were not given or they were given, they're not being respected. Now, we have to deal with it, arguably, it has to be dealt with according to the standards that exist now, and considering the base as well as other possible uses is a legitimate approach. And I think from the staff, Chad can speak to it, but I don't think it's, and I don't know that this is being represented, but the reasons for some of the distinction is not based on the base, it's based on wise land use. So I think we're trying to look at it to the extent we can based on was this good planning? If the base were not there, would it make sense to rezone a large swath of property? This may be hypothetical. A large swath of property that essentially what you can use it for is storage sheds. Is that a good planning decision for a community? Because there's opportunity to make money. I think on the parcel to the south, Mr. Love's parcel, it is on the periphery, and there are some other uses that could function there, and can do so logically and without impact. So, you know, I don't think that doesn't give you a direct answer, but I think we've tried really carefully not to say, well, if the base doesn't like it, we don't like it. We try to be more independent than that, and to say, does it make any, first start with, does it make any sense to approve this rezoning based on where it is? Is that a first statement?
Yeah,
You can disagree with me, but.
No, I agree, and it might be good for us to move on to the next. I know it seems like that's kind of where we're heading, and I'm ready to answer some of those questions, I think. And if I don't, you can ask me some more. But I think just to add to what Alex was saying, you know, the general plan in 2019 identified 2 areas that were appropriate for, you know, consideration of additional industrial. And I think what this comes down to is that this has evolved. I think we really need to look at what's happened over the years. You can't simply say, you know, in a vacuum, when you look at this one parcel, you have to say what's happened over the years. One of the things that's happened development pattern wise is you can see it on the map. This area that's identified in the general plan has already, because of decisions of past councils, has already predominantly developed with those industrial type uses. And so as we looked at the areas in the APZ, we said, you know, this is an area that, you know, if you have you could call this the donut hole piece or something, you know, what kind of impacts is that going to have? Well, you've already got much of the surrounding properties zoned industrial. So we took that look at it. Up here on 193 in Fairfield, which is the other area identified for potential of looking at some of those zone changes. Again, that development pattern that happened in the past is a lot of what drives that recommendation in the general plan. So that being said, I'm gonna jump in. That was just kind of the end conclusion for that first one. But on this particular change, we are looking at a different property. This is the property we're looking at, about just under 6 acres. Same type of request, A to M1, agricultural to diminish. But again, this is part of that evolving process. I don't know that I have a good answer for why that parcel across the street was. The previous council decided that it was, but part of this whole discussion is looking at what's happened over the years. We have to look at, and this is, a lot of this information is in your staff report. We have to look at what's happened historically. And as you can see, in that APZ area, for many decades, growth occurred kind of at moderate levels. But just within the last couple of years, we had a substantial increase. And a lot of this increase in acres of developed land occurred as a result of previous zone changes that were approved by previous councils. So those zone changes were approved. Those properties were developed as zoned, as allowed in their zoning ordinance. But there was a substantial increase in the last couple of years, as you can see. In the leaseable area, a pretty good percentage of that was in storage units. And as we've looked at this, and this was recognized even by previous councils, in 2017, there was a temporary land use ordinance that was passed, moratorium they call them sometimes, but it was a temporary stop to zone changes because of this very reason. These acres that are developed here in 2020, again, 2020 to 2022, were because land was rezoned prior to 2017. Those rezones occurred prior to that year. And that was something that, again, gave previous councils pause as well, to say, we're seeing this development pattern occur within the APZ. Is this something that we really want to see for that entire area? Is this something that would be appropriate? Do we want all of the land within the APZ to be changed to storage unit type uses, or are these really, really low intensity industrial uses? Is that appropriate? Is that amount of acreage appropriate for that type of zone? So we took a step back from it and said, no, we're going to wait for a little bit. During that waiting period, we engaged in a process with the base and with those other communities to begin that CUP, that compatible land use study. At that point, once we started that process, the city's recommendation, people as they came in for those properties, was we need to see what the recommendations are that come out of that compatible land use study. And that's not to say that there was a moratorium, but we did tell people very frankly that until we knew the results of that study, we would not recommend approval of zone changes in that area. We wanted to see what those recommendations were. So this is just an example of the type of kind of not related to, related but not related to the base, that with these restrictions, we really want to see that entire acreage develop as these light, I guess, low intensity industrial or even storage unit uses. And with that number of units that you can see, 51% of that leasable area in that area, and it's easy to see on the maps. You can see that as well around. I'm going to try to go back to one of those that shows the entire area if I can find one. But that's again is an area that we have a lot of, and that's kind of hiding underneath that tag. But there's storage units there, here, across the street from the previous application here. Others along the periphery there to the north. So that's from a land use perspective. Is that something that we want to continue? In addition to that, though, as was mentioned by both Gary and Alex, every zone change request has constraints. This is not something that's unique to these. There's always surrounding uses that we have to take into account. There's always constraints on the land. Sometimes it's a flood zone, sometimes it's a steep slope, sometimes it's just what was there before. And we have to take those into account. In this case, we have had the benefit between these previous zone changes and the current zone change of going through a compatible land use plan with the base. And we've, again, as this evolution has occurred in this area, it's been determined that the best thing and the most compatible land use is what's there now. It's that agricultural use. And the base recommendations in that CUP is that those existing zones with those restrictions that are within those easements are the most compatible land use with their operations and the continued mission there with the base. So looking at that as a whole, again, with the exception of some areas that we've identified as being appropriate because of previous land use decisions, we do feel that this is not appropriate for a zone change to M1, but this should be preserved as a way to for us to implement the recommendations of the general plan and that compatible land use plan. Now, I want to go just briefly to a couple of the things that, these are just some of the conclusions. Every time we look at these types of zone changes, again, we take these very seriously, and we come up with findings and conclusions. First of all, it's within that APZ, that's just a fact, it's within the accident potential zone. It's not located within areas that are identified in the general plan for change to industrial use. Expansion of those industrial uses within the APZ that are outside those areas that we've identified in the general plan continues that growth pattern that gave that previous council pause, that said that you know, took them to the point that they said we need to put a moratorium because we're concerned about how much of this area is developing with uses that we don't feel are compatible with the base or really compatible with the overall goals and general plan of the city. One big point that it needs to be said, we've talked a lot about these easements. That easement does not change the underlying zone of the property. There were no rights guaranteed by those easements. The only thing that happened were their rights were restricted by those easements. The right to have residential use was purchased by the government. That's what happened. Why weren't those industrial rights purchased? Because they didn't exist. I mean, respectfully, there were no rights that existed on that property. They don't exist today. There is no industrial zoning on those properties. It was never changed. The general plan for many, many years has designated that these are areas that need to be carefully protected and the compatible uses need to be put on there to protect the use of the base. And that's been happening for decades. But that discussion about protecting this area has been in those general plan documents for many, many, many years. So again, we don't find that there's been anything that's changed. Gary talked about that change in conditions. There's nothing that's changed since that general plan was adopted a few years ago. We recommend that it should still remain in the agricultural zone. One thing before I go into any questions you may have, there's been some concern that's been expressed to us and also at the planning commission hearing about the noticing process. And I want to just address that really briefly. There's been maybe some misunderstandings about how notices go out for general plans. But a general plan, because it's an advisory document, has a separate set of notice requirements from the zone map. We don't make a zone change as part of it, so it's a different noticing requirement. Predominantly, what that means is that for a general plan, we notice for some public hearings. We have notices that go out on the state notice website. We have notices that go out on our own websites that are required. When the general plan was adopted, we had newspaper notices that were required that also went out. And those things are very specific to the general plan. We went over and above that, though, as a city, because we wanted input on the general plan. This is not something we wanted to do without having the public. We wanted people to come in and take a look. So, about this general plan process to alert people that this was going on. We also sent out email blasts to those that didn't take paper copies of their utility bills. Some just get email, electronic billing. Those people got an email blast with that same information. There was information that was published through the school district's information dissemination program that they have. I think it's
Peach jar.
Peach jar, thanks. I always want to say jelly jar, but I knew it was a jar. So that went out as well. There were some ads that were placed on KSL. Social media, again, Facebook was used. I think there's some Instagram things that happened as well. So there actually was a much, much larger noticing and trying to do that public outreach than we normally would have for a general plan amendment. I guess maybe not normally would have, but that would have been required of a city for part of a general plan amendment. So I want to make sure that we're aware of that. There are some concerns about that notice process. It's a different notice than when a zone is changed because, again, you're not changing that underlying land use. You're adopting a recommendation for that. So I say specific mailings are not required. They're not. However, they did occur. We did send out some flyers to everyone that had a utility billing account within the city, along with those other notice provisions that we do. So just wanted to cover that just briefly. Again, as we look at this, we're looking at this as a recommendation based on the general plan. And that's what you do as a legislative body. You have a general plan that was adopted through a very well participated and it went on for several years, this general plan process. Once those recommendations have been adopted, you use those as your basis for making these decisions. And in addition to that, you have a compatible land use plan that was adopted that can help you to make these tough decisions. We recognize that they are tough. We understand. No one wants to be told what to do with their property. We get that, and we understand that. However, this is, again, based on a compelling public interest that the city has to protect what is a very important part of our community. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
So did that help bring any clarification to what you guys were thinking earlier?
Yeah, I appreciate all that. Thanks. And any like discussions that we have, I can speak for myself or not, because we don't think you guys take this seriously, even though we do. We appreciate all the information that you give us. Has the base made any comments? Because we had a moratorium, right? And post-moratorium, then all those the storage units went up. So if we paused and then they hit the gas pedal and all the storage sheds went up, what you're saying in bracket 3 here is that you believe professionally that if we approve this one, that they will continue on in that same area, in the same rate,
That's
similar rate.
That's what we've seen, and just to be clear, those storage units, the timing of that really didn't have anything to do with the moratorium. Those properties had been zoned before the moratorium, so they had, again, those rights to go with that zone that were pertinent to them based on that. So the moratorium was on new zone changes in that area. They could have, that was just based on personal timing of their development. They could have come in with something before that, during that moratorium for development of property that was already zoned. This was just a moratorium on new zone changes in that area. It's just to clarify.
Do you know if there were any new zone changes after the moratorium?
Applications that we've had, and again, we have a 6-month moratorium. That's as long as we can go. But when we were approached as staff by that, and just to be upfront, we try to be very, our approach is to be upfront and honest with people, and we told them that we had a compatible land use plan that was, at the time, after the moratorium had just expired, we were in the stages of putting together that team. That team was put together, started that process, and took a few years to get through that process. But during that time period, we would tell people that because we knew that was upcoming, we would not recommend approval of really any zone change in that area. We felt like we needed to go through that process, see what the results of that process were before we made any recommendations to the council for changes. So we're through that process now. We're accepting these applications. We know what the document says now. So now we can give you that, what the document says, the results of that document to help you make your decision.
Question, Chad. The email communication with the base for both of these applications, the Adams Love one, we told them what the land use was, and they came back with their thoughts. For the Carlsruhe rezone, there wasn't one. And so they came back and said, hey, make a recommendation. What are they going to do with the land? Have we since had communication back saying, yeah, it's, from our notes, it was leaning towards storage units. Did we make that communication? Did Weston send them another email saying, yeah, we believe it's storage units, what do you think? Because we don't have that here. We just have a general, let us know and we'll let you know what we think.
Yeah, I don't know if that subsequent communication took place after that. I think there was a little bit of a miscommunication on our part of what the use was that was being proposed, but again, I don't know that we did that.
The way I took that was, you gotta give us more information, but here's our parameters, here's our thoughts. And personally, I think the use fits into those parameters, whether it's, but that 67% being storage units of all the development in the last time period is a problem.
Private property is kind of in our DNA, all of our DNA. That's why we're here. And so when I look at that and I see that number, I think, well, we've kind of figured out where it could be approved. We have a reputation in Layton that we have a lot of storage units. Well, they're all concentrated in one area. And why? Well, because we have this APZ that doesn't allow much of anything except it seems like storage units seem to be something that you can, yes, get approved. And so we're back to that again, is what I feel here. Seems like we're saying, well, we gotta stop that because it'll all be storage units. It'll just be one big APZ full of storage units.
It's a great point, it's complex, but I think the important thing to remember is that the storage sheds is ground that was previously zoned. The zoning gives rights to people, and the government has to honor those rights. What's being proposed now, people don't have rights, never had rights. They have agricultural rights, which are rights. And so it's apples to oranges. And the responsibility of the community, at whatever level, is to make a decision, is it appropriate, given everything that we know, to extend rights that are contrary to maybe good planning or the base's interest or whatever criteria you want to use. Because there were people who were able to do that in the past. Some of us, the luck of the draw, some of it's the matter of timing when somebody approached the city for an opportunity to develop. But again, I don't think that's any different than commercial. If we have an area that's designated as a potential commercial area, once that fills up with sufficient commercial, if somebody comes in and says, well, I've got ag ground and I want to turn it commercial, or I want to turn it M1 down on West Gentile, I demand that the city do that. We look at the area and say, no, there's sufficient of that kind of use here already. We make those decisions every day with regard to the relationship and balance, and there's, does that make sense? And the argument which we went through this, is, well, across the street on West Gentile, they got to do it. Why can't we do it? Well, the response was, well, they did it 50 years ago, right? When West Layton looked much different than it does today. So you can't use what happened 50 years ago as a justification that you ought to be able to do the same thing now, because now you're surrounded by residential structures, et cetera, et cetera. And again, that plays out in all of these things. And it's not anybody's fault. It's not that somebody knew or should have known. It's not that at all. It's just timing of ownership and transition of families, and the market's certainly high. Well, I don't know that we know if there's an intent to develop the property or not. I think with Mr. Loves, we certainly know, because he's been and talked about the designs. But for other parties' interests, I don't know if we know if it's an effort to actually develop the property, or whether it's to generate economic value for the property but continue to farm it. Okay, I'm not saying one way or another.
We've had that chat.
But I think those are important things as well. Is the city's, if it's the latter, is it the city's role and responsibility, or very much not, to be involved in creating value for a separate third-party transaction? I personally don't think it is, but there may be others who disagree with that. But I don't think we know a lot about that, and probably should know a lot about that, because it goes back to the private property rights. But
we've had other rezones where we'll ask either us or the planning commission even asking, well, what's gonna go there? Well, we're not talking about that tonight, we're just talking about a rezone.
But it's hard to make a decision without knowing that. That's what you're talking about, right?
Especially in the APZ, that's what makes it bizarre, like you say. That's what makes it more nuanced than, yeah, we'll get to that, we'll get to the site plan, we'll get to all that, but tonight's just the rezone. Well, to your point, Alex, what's gonna go there? Well, in the APZ, only certain things can go there.
I think the distinction is, Gary can throw something at me, trying to play attorney, Gary play city manager, but I think the difference is, I think you can ask about whatever question you want to ask, but you can't demand a response to that answer as a condition of approval. So if somebody's coming in for a rezone, and you ask them, what do you intend to do with this? And they say, well, we have some ideas what we want to show. You can't say, this will inform our decision, right? Is that fair, Gary, or by Ms.
Yeah, we've done that quite often. You'll need to go farther sometimes in a rezone, especially in an area where it's unknown, as to what can and can't go there, and in relationship with surrounding uses. And we've sometimes gone quite a ways down the road We've got the subdivision up east, the Boatman subdivision, for example, where we've got an overlay zone. And that overlay zone is a good example of a situation where we require a lot of detail. We require geotechnical studies for the residential portion of that before we actually make a decision on a rezone, which is unusual. Usually we do say, no, you just need to look and see whether or not that zone is appropriate for that given area. But in a large open space like this, it is often helpful to know what types of uses they might be applying for. That always helps up front to know whether or not you got the proper access, whether you got the utilities, whether it meets the surrounding uses, whether it's compatible with surrounding uses. Those types of things are difficult to, because right now what you would be approving if you approved it is the top of the, right, everything in the M1 zone.
Yeah, I was gonna say, M1's got a big
So-
laundry list.
So if they sold this to somebody else tomorrow, that somebody else would come in with a full expectation that they can build whatever is in that list of
Right.
items.
And that's.
Yeah, and I guess that's where the development agreement comes in. And that's why it's kind of strange, because we're saying we don't want you to know we don't have to tell you what's in this area. But like Mr. Love's property, we're saying, yeah, we're gonna approve this zone change to M1, but you're not allowed to build a gas station there. So we are telling them what they can't do as a condition of the zone change request, right? Because the gas station is not allowed in an M1, right?
Gas station
CP2.
is
It's
allowed.
CP2.
It's allowed now.
Okay, so you're saying in that particular zone, no gas station. You're saying that gas station does not go into the zones, we're making this condition on what you're actually putting it in there. So that's what it means. It's a little strange because we're wanting to know what's in there for purposes of the development agreement, but we're not actually allowed to know what's in there for the purposes of denying the zone change.
Well, I think with Mr. Adams, I wasn't involved in meetings, but I think he was communicated, I think, what some of his vision was. And so the staff, based on the concern of the street drinking water and our own experience, when we were aware that that was one of the uses, expressed concern and indicated to him, I think at least from the staff level, that we would not be supportive because of the potential community impacts. And so I think that is an example of how the process actually worked, because then he said,
Yeah.
okay, what do I need to do? But on these other properties, I don't know that we know that. And like I say, you know this, once you approve the zone, then you've given rights that you can't pull back, and that they have the whole kit and caboodle of them, and that will apply across the area. And that's part of the lack of planning logic, is we don't do that with any other large swath of ground. We don't come in and blanket change the zoning designation without any idea of what's going to go there, either based on what's been represented or based on what's happened in the area. And if you look at this area, the history is that 67% of what's being built is storage units. Well, we don't think that's a very good, wise planning to do that without forgetting the impact on the base, or potential impact on the base. Just doesn't make, we would not do that anyplace else in the city.
So why would not the same suggestion or consent be provided where it says, okay, M1 is huge, there's lots of options here, but no storage unit?
There's a lot of, I guess, there's a lot of factors that go into this particular zone change, and what we're looking at, the reason why storage units have predominantly developed in this area is because of that private contractual agreement they have with base. So it's not a function of the city saying, oh, we'd be okay with storage units there. It's the base has said, here are the list of uses that we're not going to object to, and based on our easement, here's what you can potentially do if you can get them approved by the city. In this case, though, it's not that the storage unit is something that we say, oh, we're not okay with storage unit, but we'd be okay with something else in the M1. We're saying that M1's not appropriate. We're just saying that this particular property is not appropriate for an M1 zone, that whole list of uses, based on the constraints that we have, which are, it's within an accident potential zone in an area that we have a compelling public interest to preserve the operation and the mission of the base by making sure that we don't have incompatible land uses within that area. The other issue, though, is also applicable because we know that there are some limits on those uses based on private agreements. we have to look at that and say, if this was to be rezoned for that particular use, we have big concerns, because it seems as though that's where we get to. That's the lowest common denominator for people looking at these properties is, well, with all these restrictions, the easiest thing for us to do would be to build some storage units on there. And that has raised concern, not just today, but in the past as well, where we've had previous councils that have said, we're concerned enough about this, we need to pull the brakes for a little while to make sure that doesn't happen. And so I think what has to be looked at is this does not exist by itself. This is the evolution of many, many years of not only planning, but land use decisions that have been made by previous councils that have got us to a point where we have to say, is that the pattern that we want to have continue? That was looked at during the general plan process, looked at very closely during the general plan process, with even before the compatible land use study was completed, with a decision that was made or a recommendation through that general plan that, no, we don't want to see that land use pattern continue. What needs to happen there, except for in two very specific areas, is that it needs to remain under agricultural zoning. So that's a general plan policy, not just that compatible land use plans for the base.
I appreciate answering all these questions, Chad. So we've been accused in the past of rubber stamping things and just saying yes to things. When city staff, when people come in for applications, you say no a lot. And you vet lots of projects and vet lots of applications, and I don't even know what the percentage gets to us, probably not very many. So how did this one get to this point then, if we don't know exactly there should have been an application for this to say, hey, we want to do this, and so
Well, I think
you say, well, no, and then is it,
I think it's been indicated that they want to do storage units, but I think you'll see as in the conversation that we had at the planning commission was that there's a wide variety of reasons why the zone change has been submitted to you. And I don't want to speak for the applicant on that, but there has been an indication that there's been some interest in storage, and we know that that's out there. Again, though, the storage is just, this is part of it. We understand, let's say they didn't say that there was an interest in storage. Let's say the applicant came in and said, yeah, we don't have anything. That hasn't happened in this case, but let's say it did. We're still concerned enough about the fact that we know that there's an easement on this property. We know that there are restrictions on this property, that no matter what their intention was, that's what we get. There's a really good chance, 67% worth of existing leasable space out there is that. That's a really good chance that that's what's going to happen here too. And so we have concerns about that, but we'd have concerns about any of the uses that are allowed in that M1 zone because of what we have there, because of the constraints, because of the APZ, because of the development pattern that we've seen there in that area. So at some point, we've now had additional studies done that have said the best thing that we can do to make sure that we stay compatible with the mission and the operational base is to leave things as they are predominantly, with those couple of small exceptions, and to have agricultural use there with the restrictions on that. Agricultural zoning will allow residential, but the base came through, the federal government, the state came through and bought those residential rights. That takes away a lot of their concerns of buying those residential rights. Again, they didn't buy the industrial rights because they don't exist. There is no industrial right for those properties. There's no zone. So,
thanks.
Yeah.
The other thing I think to your point, Clint, just add if I may briefly, is I think we follow this, the staff has followed the same process that we follow with all the other applications you've talked about. We try to be transparent with people if we think the staff supports it or not, and our support is different. Independent of yours, who you recommend and you decide. But we try to make an informed recommendation based on what the documents are that the governing bodies currently in the past have approved and what we think your mindset is, not trying to be presumptive. And we know that if you expect us to do our job in terms of making a professional recommendation, then you may agree with it or disagree with it, and then everybody's good, everybody's done, fulfilled their role. So I think my understanding is in this case is that the good folks that have come forward, including Mr. Love, we've shared with them our concerns about that, and Mr. Love made adjustments, maybe not happily, but made adjustments to and I'm saying that kindly, he's a great guy, but made adjustments, and we found a place that worked. But I think the other family members, they know that the staff, they have known for a long time what the staff's position was and why. And I think they've exercised their right, which we certainly honor, to say we want to continue to pursue the process. So it went to the planning commission looked at it and recommended denial. And now they're even having understood that, which is their prerogative, and they should do it, I think they're saying, we want to go before the city council. And so I don't think it's any different. Sometimes people will yield or change course based on what the staff says, not that they should or have to, but they do. And other times they'll say, no, I want to have my day in court. I want to talk to the people who actually make the decision. And we say, absolutely, we'll accommodate that. But we're not going to change our recommendation, as you well know, based on us trying to count votes. Then if we do that, you got to get rid of all of us because we're of no value to you or to the community in general.
Thanks.
Any other comments on it?
That whole conversation is what I've been mulling over in my head for several days. So, you know, using the Love property as an example, and you just said this, Alex, you know, one thing doesn't work, there's concerns, go back. Essentially, they brought a development plan to us, you know, not an idea, I guess. Is there a land use law that says the zone change comes before the development plan, or can it be the other way? When there's obvious concerns like this?
Yeah, there's not. You can require as much detail as you like, because you remember the strongest position, annexation first, right? You can ask for just about whatever you like. Zone change, rational basis, that's all you need in order to make a decision. But once you change the zone, then all of a sudden you've got the administrative decisions to make as to whether or not, you know, the street should go here or this, because the uses are already settled. And so a lot of times you'll want additional information, like the Folkman subdivision up on the East Bench. They're withholding right now approval, zoning approval on that. And they have asked for, I mean, it's not unusual because we did it on Great Hawk and some others, but a significant amount of detail before they actually do a development agreement with them and then put the zoning and rezone in place. And that's generally, you have the right to do that, because sometimes that has everything to do with whether or not this is appropriate for the particular place it's in. For example, on the corner, that corner piece, to know exactly what it's going to be, there was important relative to the underground storage tanks, the potential for the number of people on the site, those types of things. That was all important to know before you actually gave your consent, if you do, to change that zoning. And so you can ask for those questions up front, as much detail as you think you need. Generally a rezone, we've told you, it's just should this property be rezoned according to the general plan. The general plan usually protects you quite a bit because you've examined whether or not there's infrastructure there and that type of thing. But in this case, you're asking for pretty much a general plan change as well. And so, it is this is the time to make the decision, and you need as much information as you can about what can and can't be put there before you actually make a decision to change the zone.
And I don't want to necessarily, talk about both things at the same time, but there's some reasons too. I think the biggest point for staff's recommendation and why we have approval for one and denial for the other application is back to the general plan. The first thing that we do when we look at these requests for zone changes or general plan amendments is that consistent with the general plan? In this case, while the area is designated as Bettina was saying before, as agricultural, there is some language in the policies of the general plan that says we could consider in those very specific areas, the intersections of Fort Lane and Antelope and then 193 and Fairfield, in those very specific areas, these are areas that we could, depending on conditions, entertain a change that would allow for that manufacturing or industrial type zoning there. So that was step number one for us. Then we get into those questions about if we were to do that, are there any uses that might cause us concern based on other factors? In this case, big factor is a drinking water well. So that's when we say, yeah, we could get there with the general plan, but we need to protect some other things that are kind of outside of that discussion, make sure that our city's drinking water supply is safe, and sure that no matter what, that drinking water is safe, so we don't have an accidental leakage of those underground tanks. So that's what we looked at analysis-wise on this parcel. So you have to get past step one before you can get to step two. In this case, we get to step one and we say, is this consistent with the general plan? And the answer is no. It's not that we're looking for a certain use that could go there. It's not that we're looking for, are there uses in the M1 that could work there and some that couldn't? It's that we can't get past step number one. We can't get past that first criteria, which is, is it consistent with our general plan? And so from our perspective, in that case, we have to recommend denial. And that's where we're at on this one. It's not a matter of, we do know that there's been talk of storage use as a potential use there, along with some other scenarios that I'll let the applicant explain in the regular meeting. But again, our position is it doesn't meet that first criteria of being consistent with the general plan.
Okay. We good for now? Because obviously this is a public hearing, so at that point, we can have dialogue if that's sufficient form.
I do have one other question, and I think it was answered earlier, but specifically to the call-through request, the space where the storage unit is currently on the corner there, I think you alluded to, Chad, that is something that you would have not expected or not wanted necessarily to be in industrial. Is that what I understand?
On the east side?
This property?
This one right here.
I don't know all
It's my
the,
understanding that you suggested that probably should have stayed ag.
I think based on where we're at now with a compatible land use study and the things that we've learned from that, if that wasn't already developed, I think we would have been looking at the same type of recommendation. However, that was a decision of a previous council. I don't know all the logic that went into it. There may have been some reasons that they had for that, but yeah, I think we're looking at this now based on what we have from our CUP and the general plan now. I don't know if we would recommend approval of something like that.
Well, the only reason I bring it up is because
This property was rezoned, yeah.
with the Love property,
It was already zoned, yeah.
with the Love property, it was also agriculture and everything around it originally was, but through zone changes, all of its surroundings have now been moved to manufacturing and industrial. And so for that reason, you can look in, when the general plan was completed 2019, you can say, okay, well, everything around there is already, in this industrial, so we can entertain a change here. But if that same thing had happened a block up, I feel like we'd be having that same conversation here. And so.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, potentially, I think the bigger conversation we need to have is what did happen, right? We know what happened in those cases. In this case, that is the development pattern that happened, so that's what was looked at during the general plan. I don't know the history of this particular zone change. I don't know why it was approved when it was. But that hasn't occurred here. We don't have that surrounding area, and I think during the general plan analysis, that was looked at and said, well, we're looking at again, this is an evolving thought process, and we've noted what's happened in the past, and we're trying to say, is that development pattern something we want to continue? And I think the answer is no, we don't. So,
have there been any other zone requests or zone change requests in those areas other than this one that haven't reached us?
not since I've been here. I don't know what happened before, but this one was before my time as well, so I don't know. There haven't been any requests though, other than the two that you're looking at tonight.
Because, this specific property, would be in a similar situation as a lot of people who live in that area who would basically have the same question about what they could do with their property. And so I was just curious if there were any previous requests that were denied and that they just went away, or there wasn't.
We've had a lot of questions, and again, our answer, there was a time when there was a moratorium, and there was a time when we were saying that, hey, we've got a study coming up, we're not going to recommend approval of any zone change there until we can figure this out. So. I couldn't tell you specifically. Some of those folks have indicated they want to continue to farm, and yeah.
It's just an eyesore that I didn't want there. Just like, it looks. I totally understand the general, the idea of the general plan, and we're following the general plan, and we don't want to have it be continuing to develop in a way that we don't think is conducive to good, best land use practices. And none of us were here when we made that. Maybe Troy was. I don't know. You. But back.
Nice try.
Yeah, that M1 is just. It's like the exception to the rule. It's just right on the front of the screen, and so appreciate all the information. It's been very helpful, all the information you guys have provided to us, so thank you.
All right. That's really all the items we have on our work meeting right now, other than just a quick, from my perspective, mayor's report. There's just two things I wanted to mention. Obviously, Saturday, the parade. You guys got your shirts here. I'll have a costume ready. I haven't done it yet. I teed it up for you guys.
Well, where are you?
That's not a joke.
I'm on vacation.
Didn't you see the Christmas card?
I
and what
did.
you had dressed like?
I did. I did.
But
That was
then-
appropriate.
Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, take fun, right there.
Don't be saying things that's gonna create.
I'm
But
just not sure what's
it's just gonna make you guys realize when I say, hey, does anybody else want to step up?
Okay.
You might want to. No. And then the other thing I wanted to let you know is, if you recall last year, we did the day of service on 9/11 for the city, and it was done throughout the entire city, and we had a ton of participation, and that's evolving again this year. And they had they've had two meetings. The last meeting they had last night was very well attended, and people were excited, so we need to embrace that, and we want to try to really get the word out so that everybody knows. And they're going to be working on some material, but I just want you folks to know that, hey, that's going to happen again.
What day is the 11th? What day does it fall?
Well, let me pull the camera. Up. Keep it going, and this is the Interfaith Council. So it's kind of through Just Serve and full Interfaith Council. So that's a good thing. That's all.
I have one question, Madam Mayor, if I may. On the account, on the now meeting agenda, that says staff updates regarding prior council meeting. What did that include?
We wanted to report back to you or in response to some of the presentations that were made at the last council meeting and to provide some context to those. Working with the mayor, we decided to do it in the regular meeting rather than.
Perfect. I just had it on my notes to kind of follow up, in the work meeting, but if you're doing that there, even better.
That way everybody can understand,
Yeah.
that, we are responding, we are listening, and gathering the information, so. All right, with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Salute.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. See you next week. Maybe you guys can. Forever. Yes. And we're starting on time at 7 p.m. So thank you, everyone, for that. As customary, we like to start our meeting with a pledge and a prayer. And each month we rotate that around. And this month it is Bettina's turn. So, or Councilman Edmondson. I do that every time.
Every time.
Anyway,
It's okay.
sure, I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Thank you. So as Mayor Petro mentioned, we each get an opportunity to have a month to either do the pledge and prayer ourselves or get someone from our community to participate. And so tonight, I'm pleased to welcome and introduce Mr. Tommy Tucker and Reverend Stanley Ellington. They're going to be my guests on tonight to lead us in the pledge and open the meeting with prayer. Mr. Tucker is a veteran. He's lived in Layton for almost 70 years. And I know he looks too young for this, but he'll be turning 93 in November. And so he's going to lead us with our pledge. And then after him, Reverend Ellington, who also lives in Layton for about 20 years, he is going to lead us in the prayer. And he is a minister over at True Vine Baptist Church in Kaysville and also one of our Hill Air Force Base employees. So I'll welcome Mr. Tucker. You can come to the podium. And I'll ask everyone to stand as he helps us recite the pledge.
We'd like for you to listen real clear. If you want to repeat after me, you may. And also bring it up a little bit, Let's don't keep it in a low key. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Good evening, good afternoon, wherever we may be. Keeping with the spirit of having some energy, we're now going to have a prayer. I know that within this surroundings, we have people of different faiths, but I ask you all to join me in the way that I pray, and then you may close in the way that you close. Does that work?
Perfect.
All right, thank you. Let us pray. Our God and our Father who sits high and looks low, the one that has created the heavens and the earth, we humble ourselves before your throne of grace because you are the only wise God, our Savior. We ask, dear God, that you allow your Holy Spirit to come into this place so that we can know the thoughts that are on your mind. We ask, dear God, that you have the Holy Spirit touch each and every one of us, that we may be able to draw from your wisdom, draw from your understanding, draw from the knowledge that you have. There's so much that needs to be done. We ask that you anoint these council members. We have some people in the audience, oh God, that are, I believe, are first responders. I ask in the mighty name of Jesus that you continue to keep your angels encamped around them as they go about the business of taking care of your people. We know that there's so much work to be done, but yet we can only do so much because we are limited in our own capacity. Wherever we need resources, we ask that you provide them. Wherever we need another helping hand, we ask that you just send that angel so that we can get done what your will shall be. We thank you for this day. We thank you for this hour, and continue to bless us because we love you and we praise you. And if everybody would just close in their own way, in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. That was wonderful. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate that. Okay. Council, do we have any municipal announcements that we'd like to inform everyone about? I'm looking at Tyson because he
Parks and
usually does it.
Recreation always first, I guess.
Yeah.
So an ongoing event every Friday evening, Fest has began, Layton Fest. So very excited about that, starting at 5:30 p.m. and going until dusk. A lot of activities, entertainment, food trucks. So come out and get dinner. And then on the July 23rd, this Saturday, full day of events from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the museum over here, the Layton Heritage Museum. There'll be the Pioneer Jubilee. The food truck rally will begin at 5 p.m. and go until 11 p.m. a free concert at the amphitheater, Riders in the Sky. It's always a good show every year. One of the activities or one of the concerts my family looks forward to every year. So excited about that. And then join us. However, our council will be attired. I'm not sure yet. It's up to the mayor, but for the light parade at 10 p.m. Starting at Wasatch Drive and Gentile Street and going to Layton Commons Park. So thank you.
Excellent.
Then I just have a couple of community announcements also. One, this is nationwide, that the 988 Suicide Prevention Crisis Line on July 16th was available to everyone. So if you know of anybody who may be in suicide crisis, 988 is that number. And that's something that comes from that Layton Communities That Care. It is our endeavor to make sure that all youth in the city of Layton have a place to go so that they can prevent suicide and depressive issues. Also, the Davis Arts Council, they have free concerts that are happening. I know that their summer concert series is pretty much sold out, but every Sunday over here in our amphitheater, they offer free Sunday concerts, and that starts at 7 p.m. And so you're welcome to come out. And on Friday, after the Layton Fest that's here over in the Commons Park, they also have free movies that will be shown. This Friday, the free film is Aladdin. So we just welcome you to come out, come to the park, come to the theater, and enjoy all of the things that Layton City has to offer.
Excellent. Okay, anyone else? Do you have any announcements you'd like to share? Okay, well, thank you. We appreciate that. I mean, it's good to kind of see how much the city has to offer, and quite honestly, not for zero cost. I mean, that's really what I think most of these announcements tonight were made, is that it's more about getting out and embracing your community and enjoying one another. Okay, tonight's a very special night. We have several presentations to give out tonight, and it's mainly for years of service. And as noted in our lovely prayer, we do have a lot of our first responders here tonight. So gentlemen and women, thank you again for all that you do for us. I do want to turn the time, though, over to our city manager, who knows these folks very intimately, and we appreciate that. And he's going to share with us those names of all the folks that have given a lot of service to this city, and we appreciate each and every one of them. So, Alex?
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. It's a privilege to be with you this evening and to have so many wonderful employees of the city here tonight. Maybe just a little bit of context or background is we have a very small, in addition to the normal compensation, obviously, that the city provides to those who work for the city, a recognition program based on years of service. And so at 5-year increments, as an employee reaches those 5, 10, 15, 20, et cetera, we take an opportunity to recognize them with a plaque that recognizes that service. If an employee's been with the city for 20 years or more, we actually ask them to come and be recognized publicly before the council. Otherwise, we recognize them in front of their peers, which means a lot in their own individual staff meetings. And as the council heard me say many times before, the secret sauce of Layton City is the employees of the city. They're outstanding employees, but they're more outstanding individuals. They're individuals of integrity and honor, and hard work, good ethic. And we have something here. Of course, I'm biased, but we have something here that's pretty unique. And if we're part of the Layton City family first, and then we have our own individual department responsibilities. And you've seen that in action during snow plowing or fixing repairs, or the 4th of July that we just recently went through, and the number of people that give of their time to make sure it's a success. It's really remarkable, and we're blessed to have them. So we have 5 individuals this evening that have been with the city for 20 years or more. 2 of those individuals I want to recognize, but because of other commitments, they weren't able to be with us tonight. The first of those is Mr. Jordan Sandel. Jordan works in the Public Works Department, and he is involved with water meter reading and also with testing and sampling of culinary water, which is a very, very important. So Jordan's been with the city for 20 years. We want to recognize him. The other one is Mr. Robert Tidestrand, Bob Tidestrand. He's a Park Specialist 3 and has been with the city for 20
1 years. He was actually supposed to come last time we did this, but he had some sickness that prevented him from being able to be here. So we appreciate Bob and all the work he's provided for the city over the years. You may recognize Bob, all the employees do. He looks like looks like ZZ Top.
Yep.
Got a big beard and rides around on a Harley, and just a great guy. He looks like he's mean, and he's just the kindest guy you would ever meet.
But his dedication to making sure our flags are out each and every time.
Yeah, very patriotic, great gentleman. So the three that we have here this evening are just exceptional employees, exceptional people, and want to recognize them and are grateful that there's so many of their peers here today to recognize them. The first is Mr. Wes Adams. Wes has been with the city for 25 years, and he is the superintendent of our water system. So water system that provides for the city of 80,000 people. It's very complex, more complex than almost anybody would realize. Wes is the one 24/7 that manages that and has been particularly magnificent in these last couple of years of drought. So Wes started when he was about 10. But
That's true.
he is an exceptional asset to the city, and we thank you, Wes. 25 years. So come around and let the council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I won't. Gary? Thank you.
Wes comes by his longevity naturally. His father, Scott Adams, which many of you know, is the assistant fire chief for Layton and has been with the city for over 40 years. So their families have made significant contributions to this community for a long time, and great people. Thank you, Wes. The second is Miss Rebecca Hall. Rebecca is a captain in the fire department. Come on up, Rebecca. And is heavily involved in the training aspect of the department, which is so critical in the fire department because of all the expertise they have to have in so many varied areas. They're the Swiss Army knives, right? You have a problem, you call the fire department, and you assume they can figure it out. So
We figure it out.
25 years as well. So Rebecca, why don't you start over there with the council with Tyson and come around? Thank you, Rebecca. And then the last, but certainly not least, is Mr. Alan Swanson. Alan is the chief of police for the city and has been with the city for 30 years. So, Alan, come on up. Thank you.
Alan. Sorry. My buddy.
Thank you, Alan. Also, would we be remiss if we didn't recognize that a big part of the success of the employees is certainly it's a result of their work, but it's also a result of the support they have from their families and other loved ones, important people in their life, and many of those are here tonight. So those of you that are spouses or friends or supporters of those who have been recognized, thank you for what you do as well and the way you've supported them and to allow them to be exceptional in their work and to be exceptionally good people as well. But maybe we have parents or others that are here, and they certainly ought to deserve a lot of credit as well. But we're blessed, use that word intentionally, to have such good quality people work for the city who are committed to the vision of the city and to providing exceptional service. We do make mistakes from time to time, but exceptional service to the great citizens of the community. And hope that that's recognized. But it's a privilege to interact with them and commend them to you, Mayor and Council. Thank you.
Excellent. Councilman Thomas.
Yeah, hey, where are you going? I'm speaking. Okay? Geez, never mind, I was gonna compliment the fire department, but not anymore. What I wanna say is, if somebody comes up here and they get a plaque for 20, 25 years, I would dare say, and I'm not a betting man because I'm usually right, so I don't have to bet. But I would say Layton has more people with over 20 years than any other city in the state. And I think it's for a reason, a good reason. And I compliment not just, there's guys out there with 45, 30. I mean, and there's a reason for it. People do come and go, but for the most part, it's a great place to work. And I think, to me, that shows me that it is a great place to work. And I just wanted to say that for not just the guys that got the 20 or 25, but there's plenty out there that are close to it and others that are 30, 40. Like Gary's been here like 90, So, but anyway, just want to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, like I said, you can see that it's quite an honor for us to be able to acknowledge these great folks within our city. But along those same lines, we also want to acknowledge our citizens. And we do have a portion of our meeting that is for citizen comments, which is where we're at this point. So if any of the citizens that are in the audience would care to speak on a topic, you're more than welcome. However, if it's already an item that's on our agenda, and then we ask that you wait, in particular on a public hearing. I mean, if you will have an opportunity to speak at that time during a public hearing. But other than that, I'm going to turn the time over to you and would be happy to hear from you. One thing, we need you to state your name and address, and should we ever need your phone number or anything, we'd ask that you do that privately.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I'm a follow-on to last time's meeting. Paul Spackman spoke for the HOA on Church Street. My name is Eileen Snyder. I live at 1074 East Hyde Park. The cottage is at Hyde Park in Layton. You don't need phone number, right? Okay. Recently, the builder in our development put in about 50 trees, and we brought it up, Paul did, at the last meeting. And I brought some pictures, if you want to pass them down. It shows them, they're about 24 inches from a privacy wall that we put in on Church Street at the expense of the homeowners, several $1,000s a piece. They're planted 21 to 24 inches from my privacy wall. They grow 50 to 60 feet tall, depending on their water supply. If they don't have enough water, their roots crawl along the property and come in and invade your patio or your lawn, and they rob all the water from your lawn. And the facts of that, and we furnished this to your city manager, came from the Extension Service, the Utah State Extension Service, who told us that those trees should never be planted in Utah because our soil is not acidic enough and it rots the inside of them. So they get full grown, and if we have much wind, and you've been around here when we've had some pretty good winds, they fall over on everything. Their roots also will crawl the 21 to 24 inches to your sidewalk and destroy the cement on the sidewalk. They figure maybe 3 to 4 years before that starts happening. We came to the last meeting and we were expecting someone to be assigned as a point of contact and contact us. We have not heard from anybody for the 2 weeks, so I'm here for a follow-on. One of the things that happened with our development is the builder was required to bond to landscape in this area. He did not discuss anything he has done with anybody who lives in there. We believe those trees are planted on our property because they're between our privacy wall and your sidewalk. And we don't know for sure because he doesn't give much communication about it. And we would like the trees removed. And when we talked to your city manager, Mr. Jensen, he did reply to Mr. Spackman that it was a mistake to allow those trees to be planted. So I think everybody's fully aware that they are a destructive issue and really should be taken out before they root much further. They've been in since the 1st of June. And I myself called your city planner the day they planted them because I have worked with landscaping and trees a considerable amount in different homes that we've built and different things. And I knew that those trees were really not the kind of tree that you'd put in the development. They are twice the size of your recommended trees in your bulletin that we had. And like I said, nobody in the HOA was consulted. So he spent money on trees and planted them, even though the day they came and were delivered, I told his son that they could not be in that spot because they would destroy the property. So all I want is somebody to follow up on it and to find out whether or not he's bonded and if those trees can be taken out by the builder and replaced with something that is acceptable in that area. And I think it's as important to the city because it's going to take out your sidewalk as it is to us with our thousands of dollars. On Church Street, there's a rock wall that we put in. On Antelope, there's just vinyl fencing. It's going to make that a popsicle wall and, popsicle wall in not very, very long. So that's all I'm here for is to please have somebody assigned to us so that we know what's going on if somebody's looking into it or dealing with Mr. Hyde, our builder, so that we'll be informed and can do what we need to do.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing me. I appreciate your time.
Mr.
Would you
Jensen?
like me to respond? I can share a little bit of insight
Sure.
to that. First, I would just say respectfully, I did not say it was a mistake. So that is a misquote.
That was what Mr. Spackman told me.
No, I understand that. The circumstances that I explained to Mr. Spackman, and Eileen and Mr. Spackman, I've talked to both of them. They've been very respectful and professional about the approach. Obviously, just as she was here this evening. The challenge I explained is that the city has a list of approved trees for park strips. It's not an exhaustive list because there's always evolving tree species that are being developed by Utah State and others that come into the area. And so when a developer, just like an individual homeowner, comes to the city and wants to put in trees, then we go to that list and suggest that they draw from that list and trees that we've had a good experience with. There's also an ability, and it's provided for in the ordinance, that similar trees to those that are on the list can be approved. And so that's what happened in this case, is that Mr. Hyde approached the city and said, these are the trees I would like to purchase. Those were on the list. And he was told those were on the list. When he went down to the nursery, which was Valley Nursery, they indicated we don't have any of those trees. So I'm paraphrasing. I wasn't there, obviously. But what Mr. Hyde has represented as the developer is that he asked the individuals in the nursery, what is this tree similar to this? To the one that I wanted to purchase. And he represents that he was told that this tree that was eventually planted is similar to that. He came back and talked with Kim Weaver, one of our planners, and said, this is the tree that I've selected. Kim did his due diligence and actually called the nursery himself and did not speak to the same individual, but asked to speak to their arborist or their tree expert. Individual came on the line and Kim said, this is the purpose of that tree? Is this work? Is this compatible with the other tree that was on our list? And what he was told was, yes, it is. And so based on that, the approval was given for Mr. Hyde to install these trees. Subsequent to that, just as Mrs. Snyder has well described, there was a discussion that took place between members of the HOA, including her and Mr. Spackman and maybe others, with Mr. Hyde about the fact that they weren't consulted on his selection of the trees. The city doesn't have any involvement in. That's a private contractual party They purchased lots that have had homes built there. The city doesn't interfere with that. We don't require the developer to approach all of the individual owners and approve the trees or type of grass or what have you. And so appropriately, and again, very professionally, then Mr. Spackman and Ms. Snyder reached out to the city and explained the background and the inconsistency between what they were told by the salesman and what we were told by the arborist. And that is, in fact, the dilemma. So what I expressed to Mr. Spackman was regret, which is genuine, is that there couldn't have been better communication, probably involved with all of the parties, to try to make sure that there was proper vetting. But I think everybody acted in good faith based on the information they had. My understanding is that Mr. Hyde has agreed to go back and along the frontage of certain individuals that have requested the trees to be changed. He's agreed to come in and change those trees. We contacted the nursery and were told, Chad can correct me, but that he purchased the trees for $160 a piece, roughly $159. So they weren't thousands of dollars each. I did indicate that we have, the city would have to be by persuasion. There's no regulatory ability. He's met the requirements of the law. The city can't go back to him because some residents don't like the trees and say, you need to tear those out and put ones in, because he followed the ordinance of the city. I did say that we'd be happy to try to facilitate a broader communication and discussion to see if there was a willingness on the part of the HOA and the developer to try to resolve this issue on the front end if there is a consensus that there's going to be, there may be a problem. And that's where it was left. We've made attempts to talk with Mr. Hyde. I don't know what the result of those have been. Mr. Spackman represented there may be some interest in the homeowners association or individuals to contribute to that solution. So that's where we're at. We don't have a resolution of it, but the city does not have any legal ability or regulatory ability to do as is being requested, to go back to the developer who's met the ordinance and say, because some residents don't like the trees you've selected, you have to get them out, or that you should have talked to them. We hope that happens. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but that's, again, a private contractual relationship between private individuals, and the city does not have the ability or the right to regulate that. So we'll continue to try to facilitate some kind of a transition or accommodation. Whether it'll be successful or not will depend on the goodwill of the people.
Okay, and are you going to be the main point of contact, or are you turning that over to someone?
No,
I think that's the one
I
thing.
have been the contact with Mr. Spackman, and again, I've been responsive to him. Other times I haven't because I didn't have information to respond, but
Okay,
we'll
I
do that.
talked to the people at Valley Nursery, and Mr. Hyde told them they were planted in 5 to 9 feet of dirt. Talked to the man he bought them from. So Mr. Hyde was not truthful with the amount of dirt that they were being planted in. And also, Kim, when we talked to him, the tallest tree that you have in your booklet is half the size of these trees that go around a very small development that have very short houses. They make copious leaves. They grow 40 feet wide. They grow into each other because they're planted 20 feet apart. And we have been told by the Extension Service they will kill each other's leaves as they join because photosynthesis doesn't happen. And so we will have a year-round leaf problem. Now, you're talking about an over 55 community. I have no husband. I have a back problem. I've had 5 heart attacks. I cannot go out and do the heavy lifting that is going on there. I cannot for the life of me understand why any city employee would approve a tree that is twice as tall, if not more. If it gets adequate water, it's 60 feet.
Okay.
And to me, this is it. I'm not trying to point fingers or find fault. I'm just saying to you, with what happened without any consultation, and by the way, there's no HOA. The HOA is Mr. Hyde because he's never legally transferred it over to the owners. He was supposed to do that this month. It has not happened. So all of us are in there. There is no communication. He's never indicated any willingness to work with anybody or contacted anybody to work with on the trees. If he's planning on taking them out, changing them out, everybody wants them removed. And up on the roundabout, he's got about 5 or 6 in the roundabout, and they're going to block your view when they grow up. So I I don't want to deny what you're telling me, because what you're telling me is probably absolutely true from what you've been told. But I want you to know those two factors, because the guy, I talked personally to the guy at Valley Nursery, and he told him those were proper trees because of the misinformation. So, but thank you very much. And you'll be contacting Mr. Spackman? Thank you. That's what we wanted to know. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to address the council at this time?
Mike Calendrianis, 2601 West Gentile. I'd like to bring the attention to the council Utah Code 10-9A-406, public use to conform to the general plan. It's my understanding that the council approved condemnation proceedings for the route 2700 west to Hillfield Road, last council meeting. If you look at the general plan on page 32 and 33, it has that proposed route in there. There's 3 options. The proposed route that was presented on the map that was presented to the council doesn't conform to any of those 3 proposed routes. So this is, again, my opinion that the general plan needs to be amended and go through that process to get that approved. If so be it, open it up to public comment. And I'll let Mr. Crane give you any legal aspects on that. I recommend that you ask him, give the pros and cons on whether you need to follow this code. Brings me to another issue on 2700 West and Layton Parkway, the newly constructed 6.5 million approximate project plus acquisition cost. It's become, I've been made aware, and this, I don't know if it's true, that city staff, or this, not even to say city staff, that road is completed, and that it's barricaded off and it's not going to be open. As some of you are aware, this city had to purchase property from me to construct that road. And we were told, the family was told, that there was an urgency to get that road constructed and open. And I find this unacceptable, that if this is true, that the road, now that it is completed, isn't going to be open to the public use and for what it was designed and what you guys paid for. So those are my comments. Thank you. Most of you have my email or phone number. If you want to talk to me in more detail from that, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, anyone else? Okay, seeing that there's no more citizens' comments, we'll go ahead and move on to our consent items. And actually, I should say item. We only have one item on our consent tonight. So, and it's a bid award with Granite Construction. So I'm going to turn the time over to Mr. Terry Colburn.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to bring before the council Resolution 2247, a bid award to Granite Construction Company for the 2022-2023 street maintenance project, various locations throughout the city. Resolution 2247 authorizes the execution of an agreement between Layton City and Granite Construction Company for the 2022-2023 street maintenance project. The project includes the installation of asphalt overlay material, rotomilling, soft spot repair, road base and subgrade excavation, pavement markings, adjustments of manholes, boxes, and valve covers, raising to grade existing covers that are covered with asphalt and associated items. 4 bids were received, with Granite Construction Company submitting the lowest responsible bid in the amount of $1,498,161. The engineer's estimate was $1,555,474.25. and staff would heartily recommend the council adopt Resolution 2247.
Council, do you have any questions regarding this bid award? Very good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, seeing that this is our only item on the consent, I will look for a motion to approve.
I move that we approve Resolution 2247 bid award for project 22-50.
Well, second.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we approve Resolution 22-47. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move on to our public hearing portion of our meeting. And under our public hearing, we actually have 3 items. And what we're going to do is we'll actually deal with each one of them individually. So basically, we will open up the overall public meeting, but then when it comes as far as action, we'll deal with each item separately. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Mr. Steve Garside, who's going to talk about the authorizing the disposal. I can't even say talk tonight of some property. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As the council is aware, when we acquired the property in order to extend Layton Parkway beyond 2200 West, it's not uncommon for us to come acquire more property than is needed for this specific project. In the situation and the illustration that you have before you there, outlined in the blue, is just over 3 acres that the city has acquired. And as we look on the better way, the most efficient way to try to utilize that property, we knew that assemblage would be the best. And so we looked around and looked at the property immediately to the south of it, which is owned by the Hill Family Limited Partnership. And in discussions with them in doing an assemblage, they agreed to do that. We had the property appraised, and the Hill Family Partnership is willing to pay the city the appraised value for that property. You have a draft contract in your packet, and the essential provisions in that contract will not change. Just to let you know, on each side of this property, there is an easement, and we'll be determining which property will be encumbered by that easement. And so the property descriptions that you have might be altered a little bit, but only enough that to accommodate those easements. Obviously, that means that if the square footage changes, so would the value that's going to be exchanged. And anyway, it's the city staff recommendation that the council authorize us to continue with these negotiations and then authorize the mayor to execute the necessary documents to complete this transaction. Any questions?
Any questions, council?
Thank you.
There's no questions, then I will entertain a motion to open up our public hearing.
Make a motion to open up a public hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on item number A, you're more than welcome to come up to the mic. Again, we follow the same procedures. You state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing that there's no one who wishes to speak on item number A, we will go ahead and take action then on Resolution 22-46.
Do you want me to close the public hearing?
Well,
Or do you want me to leave it open?
I want to leave it open because we have 3 items, and rather than open, close each one, I think we're safe from what I understand from several meetings ago. We can do that, correct?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution 2246, the authorization of the disposition of 3.05 acres of property at approximately 2400 West Layton Parkway.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt Resolution 22-46. I'll do a roll call vote on this. I'll start down here with Councilman Thomas.
Yeah.
That's a yes.
That's a yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Bettina Smith Edmondson.
Aye.
Councilman Morris.
Aye.
Councilman Bloxham.
Aye.
Councilman Roberts.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. It's unanimous. We'll now move on to item number B of our public hearing, which is regarding our general plan amendment, and Mr. Chad Wilkerson will present this item.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm going to scroll through these to get to that item really quick. This first item is, as was mentioned, is a application for a general plan amendment and zone change. The general plan amendment is proposed to be from agriculture to manufacturing, and the rezone from A to M1. A stands for agricultural, M1 is a light industrial zone. This is the location of the property shown on the red, with the red dot there. It's within our accident potential zone, located there close to Hill Air Force Base. A little closer view of the property. Property is here outlined in red. Again, the existing zoning is agricultural along with the existing general plan designation for the property. This is just a little bit of an aerial photo without the zoning overlaid on top of it. You can see some of the surrounding uses. Just to the south are the City Public Works building and shops. We have some storage units across the street to the east, more storage units to the west, some additional industrial uses to the north across Antelope Drive, and then some single-family residential further to the east and west of the property. So just a real brief explanation of some of the general plan issues with this particular property. This property is identified within our general plan as an area that could be considered for a light industrial type use. The general plan was adopted in 2019 and it identified two areas. One was here at the intersection of Fort Lane and Antelope Drive. The other is at 193, Highway 193 and Fairfield Road. With that being said, this is an area that, again, because of some of the existing development patterns surrounding it, was designated in the 2019 general plan as being appropriate for consideration of a change from agricultural to manufacturing and a zone change from ag zone or A zone to M1. We've looked at that property. There's an issue in addition to that general plan issue that exists on the property, which is there's a drinking water well located on the adjacent property owned by the city. The applicant had originally applied for a zone change from A to CP2, which is a commercial zoning, with the intent to establish a gas station on the property. Staff had some concerns about that related to the proximity of that drinking water well, and indicated that we would be supportive of a zone change that was consistent with the general plan, that those concerns related to that drinking water well would require us to propose the addition of a development agreement that would restrict that gas station use. After going to the Planning Commission with the original proposal, which was denied, the applicant has modified his application from CP2 to M1. This went back to the Planning Commission. As part of that approval, the Planning Commission recommended that the City Council adopt not only that zone change, but a development agreement that would restrict gas stations on the property. The applicant has agreed to that. The development agreement is part of your packet. This particular item tonight, the action that would be taken would include three distinct decisions. One would be an ordinance to change the general plan, to amend the general plan from, again, agricultural to manufacturing. The second would be that zone change ordinance, which would change that zone from A to M1. And the third would be the resolution adopting the development agreement restricting the gas station use. So with that explanation, the Planning Commission did review this at their June 28th meeting. They did forward a positive recommendation to the council. So we are also recommending that the council approve, again, first ordinance 22-13, general plan amendment from agricultural to manufacturing. The second would be 22-49, the development agreement, resolution 22-49, the development agreement that would adopt the restriction on the gas station. And then third, 22-12, which would be the ordinance adopting the zone change from A to M1. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Okay. Council, I know we had a good discussion in the other room, but do you have any additional questions or clarification you'd like at this time?
One question, Madam Mayor.
Sure.
The Planning Commission vote was 3-1. What was why the one? What was their issue?
We have another zone change on the agenda for tonight. That zone change was also on that Planning Commission agenda. That particular item was denied. This particular Planning Commissioner felt that to be consistent that both of these applications should be denied.
The only question I have is, I know that we do not want petroleum because that could interfere with the water. However, charging stations would be approved, correct? Should they want to present that in? I know that we really haven't addressed that in our list of
Yeah, the
M1s.
concern is with the underground storage tanks for the gas products.
Correct,
So
but I'm
I
thinking
don't know that
charging
there'd be any
stations for
objection
electric vehicles.
to a charging station that didn't have that same.
I know, it just dawned on me when we're talking, and that's the reason why I'm bringing it up now, because that is something we might want to look at going forward. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and open this up then for public comment. So anyone who wishes to speak regarding item B only on this rezone request, you're welcome to. You come up to the mic and again, state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing that there's no comments regarding item number B on our general plan amendment rezone request, I'll turn to the council to take action on this item and make sure whoever makes the motion that you kind of state all two ordinances and the resolution. Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion that we accept ordinance 2212, ordinance 2213, and resolution 2249.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we adopt both ordinances and the resolution regarding our general plan amendment from agriculture to M1 light manufacturing. Again, I'll do a roll call vote on this. I'll start at the opposite end over here. Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Okay, Councilman Bloxham?
Yeah, I just wanted to say to the applicant, I appreciate going through the process and coming back with a different option. I know that can be difficult, but I that's how the process is supposed to work. So I appreciate that and the time and probably the effort and energy and money it took to do that. I appreciate you going through that. And I can fully support what you're trying to accomplish now with the resolution that the development agreement implies. So with that, I vote yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilman Morris?
Aye.
Councilman Edmondson?
Good job, Mayor.
I had to say it slow.
I do want to speak briefly before I place my vote. We are not required to have all of these items before you tonight, but because we do, we have these three options or these three things to vote on: the change of the amendment, as well as the ordinance change in the resolution. In a spirit of similar to what's been spoken already with consistency, there have been some comments, some citizen comments that were not able to be here on tonight who have reached out to me with concerns. And for that reason, at this time, I'm going to have to vote nay.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Okay, there you have the vote. It is 4-1. Okay, thank you, council. We'll go ahead and move on to item number C, which again is another general plan amendment and rezone request. And Mr. Wilkinson will present that item to us.
Thank you, Mayor. This is, again, a general plan amendment and rezone request. It's exactly the same request as the previous one. This is from agriculture to manufacturing in the general plan and A to M1 in our zoning map. Again, the property is located not far from the one we just looked at. This red dot is the location there at approximately the intersection of Antelope and Fort Lane. A little closer view of that, indicating the zoning. You can see the overlying zone of ag there, just some of the surrounding uses. Again, you've got some additional agricultural uses surrounding it to the west and north with some residential use thrown in there. There is an existing M1 zone with some storage use directly across the street to the east. And then the other areas are, again, zoned agricultural and have some single-family residential and some just agricultural use to the south and to the southeast. This is, again, another aerial view of that property, showing, without the zoning map on, showing that predominantly vacant now and has been historically used for agricultural purposes. I want to go back to the general plan. We spoke in the last hearing that that there are areas in a general plan that are designated specifically for the use or for consideration of zone changes and general plan amendments from their current zoning to a light industrial type zone. Those areas, again, are at the Fort Lane and Antelope intersection up at Highway 193 and Fairfield Road. The area there at the intersection of Antelope and Fairfield is not one of those areas that is designated as an area that would be appropriate for a change. The general plan supports that predominantly the APZ remain as agricultural use and zoning to support the continued operation and mission of Hill Air Force Base. Of course, the accident potential zone is a zone that's placed there at the end of the runway in the area that's most likely to have potential for an accident or a crash of a plane, and that is there to protect the public and also to protect the mission and operation of the base. A couple of things in terms of history for this particular area that also play into staff's recommendation. This is an area that was recently the subject of a compatible land use study that was just completed earlier this year. The council did adopt that compatible land use study with a commitment to for a good faith effort to implement the recommendations of that plan. The recommendations of that plan were that the existing zoning, which is that agricultural zoning, was compatible with the base. That agricultural zoning, most of those properties within that agricultural zoning also have additional private restrictions from easement agreements that they've entered into with the state and federal government that restrict the use of residential on those particular zones. The agricultural zone does allow for some residential use. However, that residential right was purchased as part of those easement agreements. And so that particular zoning, and with that, again, easement that restricts that residential use even further, was something that was important as part of that compatible land use study and was part of the recommendation. Just to look at some of the development patterns in the area, again, looking outside of even the consideration of the accident potential zone, this is an area that over the years has seen some development from approximately 1970 to the last decade, 2019. There was a number of leasable areas that were constructed. You can see the total of that square footage located here in that middle column. That was approximately in the range of 153,000 square feet. Within the last 2 years, an additional 142,000 square feet were constructed in that area. The majority of the leasable area within the APZ that's been constructed in the last 50 years or so has been storage units. We've got about 51% now, just a slight majority. However, within that last 2-year period, 67% of that development that occurred was storage units. As previous councils looked at the zoning that was taking place, those buildings that were built between 2020 and 2022 were on properties that were zoned prior to 2017. In 2017, the previous council determined that there needed to be some additional analysis before additional zone changes were approved in that area and passed a moratorium. That was a 6-month moratorium that went into place to give the city an opportunity to further study this area. During that moratorium, the city started the process to initiate that compatible land use plan with Hill Air Force Base that would provide additional study of what was appropriate for this area in terms of zoning. And again, the concern being that the overall development pattern of that area was going predominantly to storage units in the last 2 years and even prior to that time. I want to just go through some findings. Every time that staff reviews an application for zone change or general plan amendment, we make findings. We have conclusions that we come to based on the situation, the surrounding properties, the surrounding uses, transportation networks, et cetera. In this case, these are our conclusions that, first of all, this is a property that's located within the APZ, the accident potential zone. It's in that direct path of the runway for the Hill Air Force Base. The property is not located in areas that are identified in the 2019 general plan as being appropriate for rezones or consideration for industrial uses. Expansion of those existing industrial uses within the APZ that are outside of the areas that are identified in the general plan would continue a growth pattern that really is not compatible with the continued operation and mission of the base, and also with the recommendations of the compatible land use plan. There have been easements that have been recorded by the state of Utah and the federal government. Those easements did restrict some use. However, they did not change the underlying zone of the property. This property has been zoned agricultural for many, many years, for decades. And it does not guarantee approval of any uses in contradiction with the city's general planner zone. There's a specific statement in each of those easements that says that those easements do not override the zoning authority of the city in terms of the uses that are allowed. We also find that there's not been a significant change in conditions around the property from the time that the general plan was adopted to now that would justify any kind of a change to the development pattern or to making changes to our general plan recommendations of the zoning for the property. And that we would continue to recommend that this property remain in an agricultural zone consistent with the general plan and with the recommendations of the compatible land use plan. Just really quick, I know that there was concern that was raised at the Planning Commission about the notice process for the general plan. I want to say that general plan notice processes are a little bit different from a zoning change, because with the general plan, you're adopting recommendations, not actual zoning. State law has some requirements for a general plan notice that really just consist of some online noticing at the state website. When this particular general plan was adopted, it also included a newspaper notice that was required to go out for a couple of public hearings that are required by state law. The city did make an effort to go above and beyond that minimum required notice. There were opportunities where residents could find out from social media. There were ads placed on KSL for that process to be involved. There were brochures or flyers that were attached to every utility bill account in the city when this process was ongoing, that would give opportunity for people to obtain knowledge of the process and become involved. That included both a mailing and, for those customers that preferred electronic billing, that went out through an email blast to each of those particular folks. So a variety of types of notices were sent out with really the desire to have public input. That was, the city wanted to have public input on that general plan process. We did the best we could to get the word out. No notice is perfect, but we do feel like we did over and above what would have normally been expected of a city to give notification to residents. We had a very well participated in general plan process as far as those go. A survey was distributed as part of that process. Over 1,800 respondents participated in that survey, which is a fairly high number. I know it doesn't seem high when you're talking about a city of our size, but that is a fairly good response rate. And then we also had a variety of public open houses that were well attended. And so again, we did the best we could, but no process is perfect. I will say, though, that it is a different notice than what is required for a rezone. I want to make sure that that's emphasized, because we're not changing the underlying zone with a general plan amendment. There's a different notice process that's required. Again, the city did meet all those statutory requirements for that general plan amendment. With that, again, this was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their June 28th meeting, and they forwarded a recommendation to deny the request for the general plan amendment and zone change. Staff would concur with that recommendation, and I would be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions you'd like to ask at this time?
Mayor, I've got comments, but I'd prefer to wait till after the public hearing part of the portion, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah. I agree. Okay. Anybody else at this time? Okay, with that, then I'll go ahead and turn the time over to our citizens, and anyone who wishes to speak regarding this item, you're welcome to.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have to say, Chad and I have a respect for each other, but we don't disagree on just about everything. So you'll find in this presentation I have to give you that our opinion and belief is contrary to a lot of the things he has to say. So while he's pulling that up, Abe Carlsruhe,
Thank you.
144 East Antelope Drive.
Thank you.
I've been asked by my family to present this both my parents, Eve and Dan, have medical conditions that kind of make it so they can't either be here or present. And there's been a lot of work on their part, on my part, on other family in relation to this. So my goal is not to bore you guys. I'm going to read through this. I timed it. We're about 15 minutes, but I'm just going to plow through it as fast as I can and open to any questions you guys might have. So the Martha K. Brooke Family Trust has been actively trying to sell their family property since 2017 after their mother's death. The family has no ability, means, or desire to farm this 5.81 acres and wants to sell the property for A, as M1 industrial property, B, to an agricultural buyer with fair easement compensation, or C, to the federal government at a fair price. The family feels that to this point, they have been treated unfairly by Layton City, the state of Utah, and Hill Air Force Base in the process. To show why they feel this way, we'd like to show you our property timeline. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the Hill Air Force Base saw multiple housing developments occurring in Layton City and moved to prevent homes from being built in the Accident Potential Zone, otherwise known as the APZ. Offers were made to landowners to compensate them for potential loss of income. These offers were low, and many landowners filed lawsuit to obtain a higher compensation for the original offer. During the court proceedings, it was made very clear to all the landowners that the damages paid were for residential restrictions. There were discussions about restricting any commercial or industrial uses, but at the time, the government gave a full list of land uses besides agricultural that were compatible with Hill Air Force Base to be allowed, which you can see on this graphic. This is the first page of the land use easement document. It clearly shows that one of the allowed uses of land in the APZ is storage units, which the potential buyer for the land is after. Storage units are allowed in M1 zoning. Those present at the court proceedings indicate that if these possible uses were not granted, the owners would have been granted a much larger compensation. In the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s, a number of landowners, including Layton City, that owned or acquired property in the APZ zone, were allowed to build M1 approved businesses. Notably, the northeast corner of Fairfield and Antelope, the property directly across the street from our family property, was rezoned and sold for storage units. Ethan Knowlton lives right up the road from here, who attended the rezoning meeting, says the city council told them that it was inevitable that the entire area, including the block where our property is, would eventually be industrial, and that Layton City would not block industrial areas in the APZ area. Because as a family, we saw the development being allowed, and we were fully aware of the land use easement allowances, we were confident that when my grandmother passed away, we could sell this property to a developer. In early 2017, we hired a realtor to sell the property. A buyer made an offer contingent on zone change approval. In May, you can see in this email from the real estate agent to my father, Dan Carlser, that the buyer met with Layton City, who agreed to approve his plans, and that the city and mayor are going to meet with the base. Then in August 2017, the family receives word through the Love family, not from the city, about the zoning moratorium the city has enacted. This is a letter I sent to my dad receiving information from Evan Love and Mayor Bob Stevenson. It says, apparently the city has made a resolution in the last city council meeting that puts a hold on all the rezoning of APZ land, and that the city is in talks with Hill Air Force Base and trying to talk to the state about pursuing condemnation money to keep all the ground in the APZ zone agricultural. Please note this statement because we'll talk about it later. Also, Mayor Stephen asked that we be patient. He also asked that we not advertise this to all the neighboring property owners. This was the only information the family received about a moratorium. In November of 2017, the family begins to talk to Joe Knott. Joe Knott is a retired Air Force colonel that has been hired by the federal government to purchase or pay for easements around Air Force bases. The official name of the shell corporation is the Compatible Lands Foundation. In these talks, no offers were given, but periodic contacts continue. In July of 2019, Dan Carlser sends an email to get information about the current standing of the moratorium. In the letter to Scott Freitag and Alex Jensen, Dan points out that the moratorium on our property has been in effect for more than 2 years. It sounds like it was only there for 6 months, but we had no way of knowing. He goes on to say, "What I simply want is communication. Please, communication." Scott Freitag responds and says he will look into it, but no information is returned. Then in September of 2019, unbeknownst to the family and any of the landowners in the area, Layton City adopts a general plan that limits our land to agriculture zoning. Please notice the times. We contacted the city in July, nothing was said. Then in September, sweeping changes were made to our property. To our knowledge, the city never notified any of the landowners in the APZ zone of this change affecting them. So in March of 2020, the family renewed talks with Joe Knott and Ernest. From March 2020 to December of 2021, for nearly 2 years, Joe Knott makes multiple promises and unofficial offers, stringing us along, thinking that this is the way to sell the land. In December of 2021, the family finally receives and signs a contract to sell the land to the Compatible Lands Foundation. In early of January of this year, Compatible Lands breaks a contract by not paying for the land. From January to February, we continue to work with Joe Knott, but the offerings are about half of what the new appraised M1 property values are. In February, we engaged a new realtor for the property. Then we met, Then we met with Layton City Planning Commission to discuss possible zoning changes. It was only then that we learned about the general plan restrictions that have been placed on our property. The family applied for a general plan amendment and zoning change. The Planning Commission voted to not recommend our zoning and general plan amendment request while voting in the same meeting to recommend Adams Love's request on the previous property that we just talked about. So let's talk about the Layton City General Plan adoption in 2019. Keeping this area agriculture has been described as a collaboration between Hill Air Force Base, Layton City for the good of the city, the state, and for Hill Air Force Base. We contend that this is a high price for a few to pay for the good of many. In this block that Layton City has earmarked as cultural, there are 8 individual families that own the majority of the land, which consists of 183 acres. Current offerings for properties in this area with M1 zoning is over $258,000 an acre. And in case you think that's high, for M1 offers in undamaged areas, they range anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000 per acre. Current offerings for agriculture land of the quality of land in this area are $20,000 to $30,000 per acre. Simple math shows, without compensation, Layton City is asking 8 families to forego $42.7 million for the good of Layton City, the state of Utah, and Hill Air Force Base. This is a very high price to pay for 8 families to pay. I'll talk about this a little bit in relation to Chad's comments he made earlier. City planners indicated there was a lot of input to the general plan. This document shows how many landowners in the affected area had knowledge of or input to this plan. The 8 landowners were asked if they were notified of the meetings or adoption, if they knew of the meetings or adoption, or had input in the process. As you can see, no one did except Ethan Knowlton. He said he had heard mention of it, but had no clue it had affected the property. This is the current Utah State Code, which wasn't in effect when this changed. But it's clear that the Utah Code was made because of instances like this. This slide shows that the Utah Code recognizes that landowners affected by general plan changes need to be notified. It says that each municipality shall provide notice to each affected entity, that they shall provide a map, invite all affected entities to provide information, that they shall send a notice to each owner and private real property. that they identify with specificity each owner that will be affected. These laws indicate that the state of Utah recognizes it's fair and right that affected landowners and should be specifically notified before changes are made to their plans. Many in Layton City, including most of the Planning Commission, believe landowners were compensated. Hold on, let me back up to the previous comment about this code. In my opinion, sending something on social media, in a water bill, in a newspaper article, is not a good form of communication for something of this magnitude. And I would hope in the future that that's not how Layton City does business, in my opinion. Many in Layton City, including most of our Planning Commission, believe landowners were compensated for all uses of land in the APZ besides agricultural. This is false. Let me repeat, this is false. You've already seen the land easement document from 1990s. Back then, the courts made it clear that the landowners were not receiving compensation to keep this land agricultural. You've already seen the letter that told Bob Stevenson trying to get damages for the residents in this area. It's clear that Layton City's past mayor recognized that landowners have not received compensation to keep this land agricultural. This snippet from the Utah Code indicates the state shall acquire by purchase or combination easements on lands around Hill Air Force Base. It's clear that the state of Utah recognizes that landowners have not received compensations to keep this land agricultural. This document is a portion of the unfulfilled contract compatible lands made to purchase our land at higher than agricultural appraisals. This and other ongoing negotiations with Joe Knott indicate that the federal government and Hill Air Force Base recognize that landowners have not received compensations to keep the land agricultural. So it seems that the courts, past Layton City officials, the state of Utah, and the U.S. government recognize the landowners have not received compensations to keep this land agricultural. However, most of your planning department commission, and perhaps some of you, seem to think that landowners have received compensation to keep this land agriculture. And again, I say that is false. We have not been paid off to keep this land agricultural. Let's move to a statement from the report from the Planning Commission. The general plan identifies that limited portions of the APZ, which Chad just talked about, could be used for manufacturing industrial flex uses. This limited deviation from agricultural use seems very arbitrary and seems to be designed to be advantageous to Layton City and a few selected entities or individuals. This is arbitrary because these two limited areas are either totally or partially in the APZ. The APZ is the APZ. It's where jets crash. If one rule applies to the portion of an APZ, it should apply to the entire APZ. This is also arbitrary because besides these two designated areas, there are at least 5 exceptions to this rule. This is advantageous to Layton City in that at least 3 city properties are or were in these limited areas. It should also be noted that several of these properties, including one owned by Layton City, were rezoned just prior to the adoption of the general plan, and that's not exactly right. It's prior to when the moratorium was placed.
No.
Prior to the
Adoption.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
2019.
This is
You guys did that.
okay.
Hey, just one at a time, please.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this is clearly much more than coincidental. I'm almost done, I promise. Shifting to the zoning change request. We contend that the zoning change request is consistent with established uses in the area. The report from the planning office states today just over half the developments within the APZ are storage units. This statement supports the idea that storage units are an accepted use of land in the APZ. On the map you see there, the red blobs indicate the location of known storage units. There are storage units directly across the street from our property. There are at least 8 storage units within the APZ in immediate vicinity. This is a good use for APZ land. For these reasons, there are easily less than 25 people per acre, and the noise of jets does not bother stored items. Also, if the city wants to keep the land agricultural, they need to know that there is currently no practical or economical way to water our property for agricultural. This applies to many other properties in the Layton APZ. There are Case Creek water shares that tie to this property, but landowners are not allowed to flood irrigate fields anymore. And the new so-called pressurized Caseville or Case Creek does not have enough pressure to sprinkle the fields. Even if the family wanted to farm this land, it would have to be without water. So going back to our goal, we just want to sell the land at a fair price or be compensated fairly. This roadblock has gone on too long. Layton City has blocked us from rezoning the property since 2017. We're requesting that you carefully consider a request taking into account the seeming lack of transparency and what appears as arbitrary and unfair inconsistencies in treatment of various properties in this area. Since it's fair and right, please grant our zoning and general amendment requests. If you decide to turn down our rezoning request, we would ask that you help us in our quest to get fair compensation for the damages and condemnations being placed on the property. Layton City and the state seem to think that the federal government is taking care of this. After over 5 years of negotiations with Joe Knott by at least 4 landowners, there's only been one sale for less than half the appraised value at the time. We would ask you to partner with the state of Utah and Hill Air Force Base in acquiring the land or paying fair damages. We are, after all, residents of Layton City. We sent all you guys, the mayor and city council, a letter last March signed by 36 landowners expressing our grievances. Eve Carlsruhe asked the mayor in person to please review and respond. We have talked with your engineers and attorney. We have had a meeting with our Utah state legislators. We have talked with the county commissioner, and still no action and almost no communication, in fact, none from Layton City. We feel we've been diligent in trying to get this land situation resolved. It's been over 5 years. In 2017, when Bob Stevenson asked one landowner to be patient, I suspect that even he did not foresee over 5 years of patience would be required. And with that, I thank you for listening to this long spiel. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you very much. And the reason why we allowed this much time is because we acknowledge the fact that you're representing a larger group here. So should anyone else wish to speak in this public hearing, make sure that it's an additional item or something that was not covered. So in other words, if you're planning on rehashing what's been said or kind of reemphasize it, we ask that you actually do bring up new information so that the council can then consider the new information as well.
Mike Clendrianis, 2601 West Gentile. Based on little information I just heard, you should investigate transfer development rights, where you transfer the development rights for the property for higher density in other areas in the city. That would be something that could resolve these property owners' issue. Thank you.
Next.
Hello. Thank you. Great job, nephew. You did your dad and my mom and my grandfather, Franklin Knowlton, proud. We are original Laytonites, and I've lived in Layton. Abby Carlsruhe House, 461 East, 500 South, Farmington, Utah 84025. Yeah. I just want to say for myself, I am the executor over the property. And with that, the reason I wanted to say this is I have been trying myself also to do my part. And I never did receive word ever in the mail, because that's the appropriate way. It should have been about a 2019 meeting. I had no clue. I would have been there, or I would have hired an attorney or had a representative. I just felt that was totally wrong. And the last meeting, it was mentioned that from the 2019, that we have no rights. It said, one of the gentlemen in the last meeting said, we have no property rights. How sad is that? Oh, sorry. I would also like to request compensation. If it is for, like they said in the last meeting, it's for the good of Layton City to keep this agriculture. For anyone who doesn't know and hasn't been to Fairfield and Antelope, my husband has every year trying to cut down those weeds because we get fined by the city to cut down the weeds. We can't farm it. We are the last. We are the last people left. And then we have under us 35 grandchildren of my mother's. Do you want them to continue this? Let us be done. Let us sell this. Please quit holding us hostage. We would like to clear this. Thank you for your support. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, Mayor and City Council members. I am Debbie Endrizzi. Do you need me to spell Endrizzi, that Italian name? Endrizzi. And I am sibling to Abby that just spoke, my brother Dan, my wonderful nephew represented us so well, the son of my brother Dan. And there are 5 of us siblings alive. I have an older sister who has passed away. And as we are making these decisions, we've already made the decisions that, of course, the older sister, those children will be compensated equally from her share. I didn't finish giving you my address. 385 Ponderosa Drive, Alpine, Utah, 84004. And I just quick comment about that Hill Air Force Base. Yes, it's my younger brother and younger sister, Dan and Abby, that have helped so much through all of this and took on so much of this responsibility. And Hill Air Force Base literally did make us an offer. They dragged their feet and dangled the time frame. We will exactly pay you on this month, by the end of this month. And then they said, no, we need a couple more months. No, we need more time. And then they said, no, we're taking the offer off the table. Then they gave us another offer and did the same thing and kept dangling it. And it was a low offer, but we actually took it because we felt like that was the only money we would get, is at least a low offer. But Hill Air Force Base kept doing that. They did even give us a third offer, another low offer, when we had one higher that we couldn't take right until we get the zoning change. And we said, we can't do this. They said, but you can't, while the Air Force gives you this offer, you have to take their offer over any contract if through the realtor. And so we couldn't keep letting Hill Air Force Base do this. And they did this through a couple of years of just dangling month after month. It was very depressing because at one point we were excited just to take some money. It's something. As you looked at the property, my mother's house is the north part of the property, just north of the property. So when you saw the diagram of the property, that's my mother's house. And she's had that property for over 50 years before she passed away. 7 years ago, I will guess. I can't remember, 6 or 7 years ago. 6 years ago. Nope, 7. That's my mother's house. And below it was her property. My grandfather, Franklin Knowlton, we are generations of Layton. My mother grew up in Layton. My mother is Martha, and she was a Whitesides Knowlton. My grandfather is a Knowlton, and my grandmother is a Whitesides. It's generations of Utah, and it was my grandfather's property. He passed it down and cut his property into 6 portions, and he had 6 children, and my mother got this property. That's what she got. This is all she has. When she passed away, this is it. My mother didn't have much. She was a good hard worker, and she didn't have much. And she did have this house on the property, and we sold it immediately for song because we figured we weren't going to fix it up. The siblings, we all decided we wouldn't fix it up, so we just sold that property for a very low price, and we could split that up, and the rest was this property that we thought for sure we'll sell this property, and this will be our one little, as we would tell our mother, our 1/6 of the pie, because we talked before she passed away about this. And if you refuse to rezone this, Hill Air Force Base isn't going to come back with another offer. Nobody's going to buy this land. It has never been agricultural. It's been zoned agricultural. I can tell you, my mother's had this property over 50 years. It's weeds.
like my sister said, we have to pay to take care of the weeds as the neighbors complain, and we have to pay the taxes. But it's other than that, it's just a cost problem for us as we own this property. And you're going to hold our land hostage because there's nothing we can do if it's not rezoned, except sit there and we pay for the weeds and the taxes. That's it. A member of the Planning Commission, when we met a few weeks ago, they said, one of the members said, people shouldn't have bought the land hoping they could change the zone and sell for profit. We didn't buy it for that. We never even bought it. This is our heritage. This is our inheritance, and this is our heritage. This was my grandfather's property. This was my mother's property. This is what my mother hoped for us, is that we could split this property 6 ways financially and have a little teeny nest egg. And I say that because I moved to Utah. I have lived in the desert in Arizona for years. I moved to Utah 6 years ago, and you can't help but make land be a little personal. And when I moved here 6 years ago, some of you at my age would have been contemplating retirement, but no, I was out looking for a job again. I teach high school math. I still do. Not to get me wrong, I love those kids. But with this teaching, I just thought I could have my pockets padded a little bit. I have hopes and dreams. Yes, I'm a teacher, so they're not big hopes and dreams, but they're little. And I still wanted those hopes and dreams. And as they made comments, we have to make the decision now. We're helping you, help us. We are not going to leave it for my mother's 35 grandchildren to make a decision on less than 6 acres. We know it's our responsibility of these 5 siblings that we have now to make this responsibility. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. You know, I failed to mention that typically when I have somebody speak, I said we give them extra time, but then individually, we usually try to limit that, just so you know, but you're fine. I just wanted to, let the rest of you know. Go ahead, make sure you state your name and address, though.
Liz Sears, 2532 Pinewood Lane, Layton. I am the realtor that they hired in February, and I wanted to simply share stats with you of what has occurred since I listed the property. On just one of the websites, I listed on multiple websites. On just one of the websites, we've had 31,341 impressions. We have also had 825 private agent full reports, which means that somebody wanted more information. 825 people wanted more information about this property specifically. We had 579 public people. This is separate. This is in addition to the 825 who wanted additional information about this property specifically. 2,738 times the home showed up in a private search. I've had over 60 phone calls asking about this property. I've had over 10 offers on this property, all who needed to rezone it. Every single person I said, if you could even get us an agricultural offer that was even close to what the Hill Air Force Shell Company said they would pay, but has never done what it takes to, that we would consider it. None. Not one. Every single person who calls says there is no value as an agricultural property. They will not buy it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Council, do you feel like you need any questions answered or regarding this property or the rezone request? I know a lot of us heard quite a bit in the other meeting, but you wanted to make sure we listened to the residents before you took any action. So I just want to make sure we get all of your concerns or questions answered before you take any action.
Obviously, I can't sympathize for the applicants because I don't live in or own land in the APZ zone. And as just my thoughts tonight as council members and as a mayor, we're charged with doing what's best for the city. And I kind of feel like the applicants and those that reside in the APZ are kind of unique to the city. And so I do have sympathy on that aspect. I am supportive of finding the best use of land for the property. But unfortunately, with all of the options with M1, I can't support it tonight without more clear direction of guarantees of what it will be used for, if that makes sense. So at this point, I'll be voting no or supporting the denial at this point.
Anyone else?
So I can make my comments about my position, and that position would be based on consistency with the previous request and both those requests being in the same original area. So I'm not fully on board with denying that on this evening, but maybe tabling it for the future for some discussion, just because of consistency with the area.
The public hearing is still open. You're welcome to stand up, state your name and address.
I would just like to address your question. Our zoning request did specify storage sheds. It seems to me there's been confusion, but there was a letter that I sent to the city when we made the zoning request that did specify storage sheds. So that has been specified. And I'm sorry, that seems to have been a point of confusion. And I wish that that was resolved earlier. We felt like that was resolved fully when we met with the Planning Commission on this. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
Oh, my name is Eve Carlsrue. I live at 659 East Antelope Drive. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Sorry, one more thing. Do I have to say my name again?
We have it, just make sure it's
Okay, Abe
brief.
Carlser. That being said, and I don't know that I could speak for the whole family, but if there are specific things that you as a city deems as appropriate uses in a different zone other than agricultural, we would definitely be willing to entertain those things. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, is there anyone else that wish to speak? If not, I'm going to turn it back to council to, I guess, take action and possibly close the public hearing.
May I?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, go ahead.
In the work meeting, I feel like there's something bigger going on here, something that maybe is just, yeah, this property is important, and this family, Layton residents with property rights, I understand. I don't want to deny this. At the same time, the previous rezone that we handled tonight was more clear. And I was able to support that. This doesn't seem clear to me yet. And you've put in so much work and years, and we've had 3 hours, this council. And we're the kind of the final vote tonight, could be. And I wouldn't want to, if we deny this, or then it's a year process to reconsider. And I don't want that either. If we can figure out more clarity on this. You mentioned storage units, but I don't see that here. I see 3 options. I see, you're just like, what can we do? It's not clear. The previous one was more clear. I'd like to, if we table this, and as Bettina has mentioned, and figure out more clarity, I think that would be more fair to you all, and give us the time that we need to maybe figure this out.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak on this or be bold to make a decision here on how you'd like to act?
I'm bold. I can do that. I move to table the item to a future city council meeting regarding this request, which is a general plan amendment for the Carlsruhe rezone from agricultural to M1.
I can second that.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we actually table this until we have not identified a time, correct? You just want to table it and have some more facts. You don't want to put a stipulation on it? I just need clarification here, as well as, do you want to keep your public hearing open or not on this one particular item? Gary, can we do that? It's probably more, I should have looked at you first before I even said that, but I need clarification myself.
Yes, you can continue it. If you continue it to a date certain, of course, you don't have to go through the advertising that you've gone through for this. So you could continue it not to a date certain, and it would be really good for staff to have some direction as to what you'd like them to come back with, because that's just continuing something out there. It's likely to linger out there and essentially be the equivalent of a denial anyway, if it's out there long enough. And so, can you close the public hearing? Yes, you can close the public hearing if you don't want any further input from the public, but want more discussion between staff and yourselves. You can always open up the public hearing later if you wish to, or you can leave it open at this time.
So if we close the public hearing, because obviously it's a public hearing, we need to close it on the two above items, but should they want to keep this one open, then I'd have to vote on that twice. However, if we close them all now and we give a date certain so that staff's got direction, can we then reopen the public hearing at that time as well?
Yes.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Okay, with that, we've got a motion before us to postpone or to table item number C, the general plan amendment. We need to specify a date certain, so I need to have a friendly amendment there, and to close the public hearing.
Okay, may I make the modification to my own motion?
Yes.
So I move to change the motion to have an end date of August 18th, 2022.
So basically, 1 month?
Correct.
Okay. Councilman Morris, you second that. Are you still
second.
willing to second? Okay, it's been moved in second. And are you willing to close the public hearing?
And I move to close the public hearing.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. And I'll start out with Councilmember Bloxham.
I actually agree with what you said, Clint, or Councilman Morris, about we've only had a chance to review this really for a few hours. As you could see in our discussions in the work meeting, it's an issue that we want to get right, that we take seriously on both sides, and that we, as you saw, we asked the staff some pretty pointed questions, and we have pretty pointed questions for you too. I just can't ask you because you're speaking at the podium without me. But that's because it's an important issue, and so I would vote yay on tabling this issue so we could get more information, so we can get some more specificity about what it is actually that you're wanting to do with this situation, because this is a single zone change, but you have a signatures of dozens of people. So what we decide in this situation is going to be the decision probably for the rest of them. And so that's not something I'm willing to decide in one specific meeting. So that's not an adjudication of my final decision on the matter. It's just that I'd like to have more time so I can look at it, so that I can feel fully informed about making a decision on what I think is important. And I think you, as the property owners, deserve us to look at it as a council for more than just a single meeting. So I hope you don't look at the tabling as if we're trying to kick the can down the road. It may not. My vote may not be any different now than it will be in the future. I'm not promising that, but I want to be more involved and have more information, and I think you deserve that. So I'm voting yay.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Okay.
Everybody's got something to say. I have many concerns, but the one that I have is August 18th. I mean, you presented, I've got a list here about 15 items that I have to find out about. And August 18th is in, I don't know when it is. What is today? 21st.
Roughly 30
So
days.
anyway, a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have 2 meetings and I think we would have to have a special meeting. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And we can do that.
To do this. So I'm fine with August 18th, but I'm a little hesitant to make you wait any longer than you. I'm sorry, but we all know no one's really addressed it, but we're sitting on a bigger cow than we want to admit. And that because, like Zach said, we open the door, I don't know what's going to come through it. And so we have to be careful about what we open. So, but I will vote yay. That's
Okay.
to agree with you.
Okay, very good.
Okay, but that's my concerns.
Okay. Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Roberts.
A big aye. I appreciate my colleagues, council members for the motion to table, and I'd love to look into this more. Thank you.
Okay. And Councilmember Edmondson.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a unanimous vote that we will then table this item until a date certain. And the public hearing is closed for the time being. So that concludes all of our public hearings, and actually it concludes most of our items on our agenda at this time. However, I do have one more item here as far as under unfinished business, and I know a portion of that we did address earlier. We do want to make sure that we respond to public comments, and so we will have a staff update on some comments that were made in previous meetings. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over. I believe is Mr. Jackson still here? He's going to address a couple items for us.
You guys, you don't have to sit and go through all this. I mean,
Yeah, you're welcome to
you've
leave.
done your job.
Thank you for your patience, so.
So I have 2 items. One of them, I think Chad's going to address as well. Would you rather we speak about 2125 East or the Case Creek Estates, or excuse me, the out west, near the West Davis corridor? Is there a preference either way, Alex? Maybe? Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you for letting me come back and chat about this. Just to kind of bring everybody to, I wanted to pull up a map here real quick, if I could. So I think you're familiar with the new Gordon Avenue interchange that has been built. With that, the Cottages at Valley View subdivision has been purchased or built as well. Phases 1 and 2 are on either side of Gordon Avenue. There is some concerns about 2125 East and the way that that road drives. It is a challenging place where we've had to build that road as far as the grades and then the speeds that are being driven on that road. I'm not going to lie, the entire state of Utah seems to have a speeding problem going on right now, if you haven't noticed in the news. We're not immune to that, unfortunately, or fortunately, we're not seeing 100-mile-an-hour speeds, but we did do a traffic study on this area, and we're seeing higher speeds on that road than we'd like. I think that partially is due to the amount of, you're coming off of 89, you're coming down these grades, going eastbound, it's open. People like to drive fast on open roads, unfortunately. So with that, though, we did do several traffic counts on this area. We're doing them kind of in conjunction with active construction, which is not always typical, and it doesn't give us the best data every time because we're modifying traffic patterns because we have roads closed or roads open, or people don't like to be around heavy equipment, whatnot. So we did do a traffic count back in May of 2021 prior to the Gordon Avenue interchange opening. We saw down at Emerald Drive, there's a roughly equivalent amount of traffic being driven there. We saw 3,800 vehicles per day on Gordon Avenue. We saw 4,100 vehicles on Emerald Drive. And so that's one of the reasons why that three-way all-way stop was put in. One of the warrants for those all-way stops is that the traffic needs to be roughly equivalent and the volumes need to be high enough in order to make that happen. In addition, there is a slight sight distance obstruction with some trees that are on the corner of that intersection. In October 2021, after Gordon Avenue had opened, we did another traffic count and we showed that 5,800 vehicles are now traveling down Gordon Avenue in that same area, while 3,000 vehicles are now traveling in Emerald Drive. Up at 2125 East, just to put it in perspective, there's 658 cars a day on that road. So there was a question about why Emerald and not here. It's because of the volumes of traffic that are on that road. Gordon Avenue at 2400 East is about 4,500 vehicles per day. So there's a large difference in those two. There are more traffic counts scheduled for August. Again, we got to work around our traffic or the construction in that area. It is an active construction zone, even though it doesn't always appear like it. There is additional sidewalk that needs to be installed on the north side from 2125 East over to Andy Adams, as well as the south side of the road. There will be a 10-foot trail constructed by UDOT as part of the project as well. We do have a street lighting contractor that's on tap to come in as soon as we can get the material. We're suffering from the same material shortages that everybody else is dealing with. But that's kind of where we're at. It is an active construction zone. We looked into the accident data there, and apart from the first accident that was mentioned in the last meeting, that was roughly close to that original opening of the road, there is no other accident data on record in that area. However, we are seeing speeds that are higher than what we'd like, and so the mitigations that we are proposing for the area that we're looking into, I'll bring up a diagram here to talk about for the people who are having concerns that they're not being able to see the intersection. We have these T intersection warning signs that we want to install. What they will do is alert drivers to the fact that there is an intersection coming up. It will have not just the ahead underneath, but it'll give a distance. And so we're working on figuring out what the appropriate distance is to warn drivers that there may be cars entering or pulling off into that intersection. The stop bar that is located on 2125 East sits pretty far back from where it is, and that was installed with the intent that someday there might be a crosswalk warranted there. And so the state traffic code requires that any vehicle that's entering an intersection has to stop at that stop bar prior to entering into a crosswalk. We think that the crosswalk may not be warranted yet, and so we would like to relocate that stop bar closer to the intersection. What that will allow is for people to stop at that stop bar further towards that shoulder line where it gives them better visibility. Just to make clear to everyone, even with the challenge and the grades and everything, this does meet all of the roadway design standards and requirements. Unfortunately, they are the minimum in a lot of these designs, and we've talked a lot about the minimum design. It's not a design flaw, it's just the minimum design, and sometimes it's not as comfortable as it otherwise would be for motorists and drivers. In addition to that, we have an additional speed limit sign on that west side that needs to be installed. We have temporary speed limit signs up right now. And then because of the grades on the road, we don't see a lot of really big changes or effectiveness with the radar speed signs that we put up in places. But this one, based on the geometries of the road, based on those conditions, we think would be a good candidate to put up these radar signs to remind people of what the speed limit really is on this road. And so we're evaluating the best place to put those westbound, eastbound. Surprisingly, the eastbound sign that's shown on this diagram is actually where we're seeing the highest speeds of people going eastbound. So I don't know if they come up over that rise and then just take off or what, but that's what we're trying to figure out. So again, we're anticipating having the traffic counts done again in August, and that will inform us as to where those radar signs need to go, but we can certainly make some of these other adjustments to the those signs that we can get up now. We'll obviously have to order those signs and then hope for the best, I guess, with the supply chain issues that we see. So we have looked at the transportation master plan. It calls for a signal at this intersection someday once the warrants are met. The roadway Gordon Avenue is anticipated to carry 10,000 cars a day, so we're roughly about half of what we anticipate that to be in 2040. The signal warrants that would require us to look at things as if there is appropriate gaps for people to enter and exit that 2125, where 10,000 cars a day on Gordon versus what 2125 will be is probably not going to even be close to one another, but it will influence how and when that signal needs to go in based on the gaps that need to be created for people to safely enter and exit the road. For those people who are uncomfortable using the intersection, even though it's meets the standards, I do need to point out that there are alternative routes for people to take. If they need to, they can use Emerald Drive. They can use 2575 up to the east or the new frontage road, and they can get to those by going up Oak Ridge and up on Cherry Lane. So I know that's not always the most popular answer. Even with school kids, we don't send people the most direct route. We send them the safest route. And if somebody is not comfortable, they do have those other options to get around. So with that, I think the only other question that somebody raised last week was the pedestrian crossings. We are doing pedestrian crossing warrant studies. They have not been met in any place yet to where we can put in one of those crosswalks. We are working with our police department to continue the speed enforcement. And with that also comes these warrant studies. We can't put crosswalks in on roads that people are speeding at excessive speeds either. So it's a combination of a lot of things that we're trying to get taken care of right now. So are there any questions I can answer on this one for you that?
Go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
You mentioned the radar signs. Just a question on the ones that were put in on Antelope.
Yeah.
The dip. Have you seen improvement there? I'm not speeding on there anymore, but have you? So there's one who's not.
We saw a drop in the speed of 1 mile per hour. But what we did see, and I don't want to make that to be small, but what we saw is there was a far wider range of people that were speeding, and so instead of that wide range, it actually has kind of sucked into the middle, and so maybe we got some people that are speeding up now because we're reminding them the speed limit's 40, but then we've got other people who have slowed down, but the average speed has only dropped by 1 mile per hour. So again, we feel like in this situation, because of the grades, it doesn't hurt to try and remind people of what those speeds are, and we'll have to put them up and monitor them. We'll do this count in August, and then we'll have to do another one once they've been up for a little while.
I'm sure that this is going to be illegal. Everything I think of is illegal. But you've got your T intersection warnings.
Yeah.
Okay. And then underneath them, you're going to say
200 feet ahead or something like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
Is there any way to cut the road?
to cut the road.
You know how they cut the side when you go off?
Yeah.
Yeah, rumble strip. Is there any way to put a rumble strip at that sign so when they hit it, they first thing they're going to do is look around and they're going to see this sign?
I mean, we could certainly look into rumble strips. We haven't used those before.
Well, I know
All
I
I know,
recommended them
they
on
scare the
Antelope and they
crap
didn't
out
want
of
to do it.
me.
Yeah, I think it does cause some issues, freeze thaw, and those rumble
I
strips
can
create
understand,
some major problems
I'm
for us,
just,
but.
I'm trying to think of things that make me look, and that's one.
Yeah, and I think what we're hoping is that those signs, because there aren't a lot of signs, there's a fine line between too many signs and not enough signs,
yeah.
and that's what we're trying to hit with that, and
Well,
then.
if you do put lights on it.
Yeah, and we can look
I
into
mean, that's
that.
another thing. I always notice the lights,
Mhm.
but a lot of signs, I see them all the time.
Yeah.
You know, after a while, they're
Well, there's some pretty creative ones out there now. I know I've mentioned it to Alex as far as some other styles that might be pretty impactful that I've seen. So I don't know. Maybe we can investigate, see if there's maybe experiment with it, with that other sign that I'd mentioned, see if that might help, especially in this area. But, okay.
Any other
Anybody else have
questions I
any
can answer
questions
on
with
that
this or need any updates?
We had quite a group of people here last time. Have they been given information about this? Or, I mean, I know a lot of the information's still in a concept form, but did they leave a contact information or someone a point of contact? Because there was a
Our traffic engineer, Liz Felix, has been in contact with quite a few of them, so I can have them reach out once we get the more finalized design.
Just want to make sure they know that we're working on it. So
Yeah.
thanks, Steve. Thanks
Yeah,
for all
they
that.
have been.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't have my notes from last meeting, but for some reason I remembered 2550 East also, which is further up east towards when you first get off of 89. Was that something that was also mentioned, not being able to see out of that street? For some reason, that's what I remembered. And I've been on that road a number of times, and I know it's also difficult to see there. So I just wasn't sure if I'm remembering that wrong. But 2550 East is further.
I know
further
Mr.
up.
Crane drives that quite a bit.
I can't remember which one was 2550 East. There's two roads that come out of that Orchard Grove subdivision. I can't remember.
Yeah, 2550 is the eastern one, I believe.
Yeah.
Is it the one?
I don't have a note that says that was an issue. I think what I've heard, though, is the speeds are a concern up in that area.
It's just
as
coming
well.
off the, I think, 89.
It's the second one. The first one, I don't remember the street number,
Yeah.
but they're two very close to each other. 2550 is the one that's further west.
Yeah, they're, once again, speed is,
Yes.
it's interesting how it picks up closer you get to 89, which is kind of strange, but
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. Not as bad as the 2125, but 45, 2145, 25.
Okay, well, that's a good update.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then we need to talk about the Cays Creek HOA. I sent a link to a video about the noise walls. Did everybody have a chance to watch it so I don't need to show it again, or would you like me to show it? Okay, perfect. So I have two items that I need to address. The first was they were concerned about warranty work that's went on out there in the subdivision with concrete removal and some things like that. I had a chance to have our inspector talk to the contractor, and I'm not trying to play one side against the other, but our contractor knows all the right, or our inspector knows all the right questions to ask, and he actually went out there the day after the meeting to inspect to make sure everything was in order. He was told that the contractor did meet with the HOA board prior to the work, and they said there was approximately 10 people at that meeting. So I don't know if that was all the board members or the presidents or who that was, but there was notification made to the HOA management group or whoever that was, and that they thought that there was being notifications made to the homeowners. I don't know how that did or didn't work, but then the contractor also went and knocked on every door that they were impacting driveways, things like that, to try and, before they started the work, if somebody wasn't home, they did need to get the work done, but they did plate all of the driveways to allow people to get in and out of the driveways, and they've been good to work with. Contractors, you know, seem scary sometimes, but if you just say, hey, I need to get out of my driveway, a lot of times they'll move the equipment for you or whatnot. So can't speak to that interaction, but I know that's what the contractor had said that they were knocking on the doors, and anybody who wasn't home, they were still making every effort to make sure that their access was maintained, even if it was maybe delayed a little bit or not. The contractor did ask to have the irrigation shut off for 3 days because of all the water that was coming into the excavations, and it was ruining subgrade, which creates problems because they can't get the compaction, and then the quality of the product suffers. The city did shut that water off, but due to the complaints from the neighborhood, the contractor called the city and asked it to be turned back on shortly after it had been shut down. So, and then there was some comments about Weaver Lane not being finished. The contractor's out there working on the subgrade and the pavement right now. We anticipate that paving to go down pretty quick, and then they will finish up the rest of the sidewalk and the park strips and all that stuff that I think Chad's going to maybe address there. But then the other item I had, well, is there any questions about how that process works with the warranty work?
I just had a question about
Yeah.
so when I went out there, as soon as you drive into the subdivision on the south side, what they told us that you could see the road. You can totally see the road. But as you drive farther north, you can't.
Yeah. Let me talk to that with this noise wall policy. So the original design for the West Davis corridor was to, and their commitment has always been, they want to keep the road as low as possible in any of these existing neighborhoods, subdivision areas. The original design for this area was that a pedestrian overpass would be constructed while the road came over the top of Case Creek. When they got into the design process, Case Creek required such a large box culvert structure that the contractor came back with what they call an alternative design concept. And that alternative design concept was that since they were already having to put in this big box for Case Creek water to go under, or the stream, that they would also be able to benefit the project by putting in a pedestrian box culvert rather than building this huge pedestrian overpass. So the original noise wall study that is done across the entire corridor, UDOT follows those federal and state guidelines very closely, make sure that they're meeting all of those criteria. That original study, this area did not qualify for any kind of noise mitigation wall. Okay, when the the alternative design concept came in, it triggered a review of that design because it needed the road in that area to the south end where you've noticed it to be raised 3 to 4 feet. However, everything kind of north of there, as you mentioned, that design change is never, that grade has not changed. And so what ended up happening is that alternative design required this review of the noise mitigation plan study, and that's what triggered the noise wall potential to have it be installed. And so UDOT went out and, identified the affected properties that would be able to vote for that noise wall. You saw in the video the explanation of how they determine who those are and then how that works. And they submitted the ballots. And if you remember, it's 75% of the people have to return a ballot. And of that, 75% also need to vote in favor. And if those criteria aren't met, then they can't install the wall per the policies that they have. And it also is a cost thing. They had to determine if the costs were appropriate to do that. And so it met the criteria after this alternative design was approved to have a noise wall installed if the residents had voted for it. And so the proposal was for a 15-foot high wall to be installed rather than the 10-foot wall or the 10-foot fence that is out there now. They put out the first ballot in June of 2021, and they didn't receive enough of them back. So right there, they could have stopped and said, hey, you didn't even get enough back, we're done. UDOT went out of their way and sent a second ballot in July of 2021, still didn't have enough responses. All the while, the contractor is saying, hey, what do we need to do? Because if the noise wall was required because of this alternative design, then the contractor would have to install that wall as part of the approval of that alternative design. So what normally is a 2-3 month process, they went out after that July ballot and they started knocking on doors until December of 2021 to just get to the 75% response rate. So they spent 6 months in what normally would have been a 2-month process to really do the due diligence to make sure that if this is what the people wanted, that they were able to get it. Unfortunately, after they did hit that 75% threshold, they didn't meet the 75% approval threshold. Okay. And then of those that voted no, or you can put down a reason for voting yes or no on the little ballot that they have. We had a sample ballot they gave us. Overwhelmingly, the people who voted no said that the reason they don't want it is because it would block their view.
Yes.
So we feel like UDOT's done their due diligence. They're consistent. This is the same process that's been followed up on the 89 project. They don't just start with one design and change it without having to go through that whole process again. And it is an expensive process, but UDOT is committed to making sure that if that's the outcome, that they install these walls. And it could have been a several $million wall that would have had to go in had the residents voted for it. But unfortunately, the residents are the ones that voted it down. So any questions I can answer on that?
Nope. You've got
Okay.
one more item out there?
Chad's going to cover,
Okay,
I think,
before
the
he
other
does,
half.
and
So,
just out of curiosity, because
Yeah.
it was brought up earlier, and I know that, you're probably the one that would most likely be able to answer this. So what is the deal with when would we be opening up the 2200 road that was brought up earlier?
2700 West
Or
Layton
2700
Parkway.
road, yeah.
So the road, even though it looks done, it's not fully complete. We're waiting to get the materials for the streetlights. Like I said, I mentioned earlier on Gordon Avenue, we actually have streetlights to still install. There's some pavement fog treatment that needs to go down because they did some grinding out there. And then we've also got some additional landscaping in those ponds that we're trying to get taken care of. One of the things we're trying to avoid is all of the trucks that are in the area right now. They want to use that road really bad, and we're trying to prevent them from doing that, not only for, just the sake of the neighbors in that area to not have every truck in the whole West Davis corridor using that area, but, so the plan is to get it done, but we want to make sure that we got our work finished and where the road is not necessarily connecting to the freeway yet. We felt like it was appropriate to give our contractors some more time to finish the lights. It's a separate contractor that's coming in to do that, and then we'll get the landscaping tied in. So it's not going to stay closed forever, but we certainly don't want to open it any sooner than we have to if we can avoid having all those trucks try and use that road. So
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm gonna
All
let
right, one last item.
Chad address those.
That's why I figured he's up there.
All right, just want to bring up a picture really quick here. The item, and I apologize if I'm missing an item. You could certainly ask any other questions. I was joining you last time via laptop from a COVID recovery, so hopefully I can get you this question answered. Let's see. Got to find my cottages at K. There we go. Okay, just this is a landscape plan from the cottages. Cottages or villas at Case Creek. This is the subject property we're talking about. The question was regarding a fence that's along 1000 South here. As you recall, we have a standard that requires that on arterial and collector streets, we have a landscape buffer. When this PRUD was approved, well, let me back up. The purpose of that buffer is that when lots have a rear yard or a corner lot side yard that abuts that street, we want to make sure that we don't have a fence right against the sidewalk. Now, there's lots of examples of places where we do have that predate this 2002 ordinance that was adopted. But since 2002, we've administered that ordinance and required that they have that 5-foot setback so those fences aren't right against the property line. On this particular development, they came in with a plan that showed a very large open space area without any fence right along that back of sidewalk. We didn't require them to put a fence because of that large open space area. That large open space area could essentially function as a front yard. It was common area, was not privately owned. These are not, these units do not extend to the back of that sidewalk. Their property lines end right there. So we accepted that and said, that's fine. You can go ahead and do that open space, no fence required. Between that time and when the units were built, some of these unit owners were wanting a privacy fence essentially to create a pseudo backyard for themselves, even though this is common area open space. They approached the developer. The developer, without approval from the city, installed a fence right along the back of that sidewalk and went forward with that design. We had an owner across the street that was notified that they had fence that needed to be moved because they had built too close to the sidewalk. And when we notified them, they said, "You're right, absolutely, we understand. However, what about the guys across the street?" And we looked and said, lo and behold, you're right, there's a fence there. Yeah, we thank you for letting us know. So we contacted the developer. We do have a bond still that's still out there for this particular subdivision. We said we need to have that fence moved. We communicated that to the developer a couple times and in writing that needs to be removed and the reasons why. I'm not sure that that's been communicated to the homeowners association. Sounds like not effectively. Our contact is with the developer. We still have a bond. This is a bond item that needs to be taken care of. So we had not communicated that to the homeowners association ourselves. However, we're happy to reach back out to them and explain the reasoning. There were a couple of things that were said about, some of the emotional distress that might occur if that fence is moved back. I want to just point out to the council that there's a 5 foot, well, I don't know how tall the berm is. There's quite a tall berm though, that's within that 5 foot setback that they'd be required to do. The fence would go up, not down. So any light impacts are going to be further blocked, not less blocked, if that makes sense. There'll be more light blocking going on with a higher fence than there would be with a lower fence there if they were to move that on top of the berm. So again, that's been something we've communicated to the developer. We're still working on that to be completed before the bond is released.
Okay, quick question. So what you just said then is technically the developer does not even need to re-erect that fence for them.
They could simply remove the fence. Yeah, they could just remove the fence and
Remove
be
it and
back
be
in
done.
compliance. Yep.
Okay. All righty. Anybody have any questions?
Just one comment. I think we all appreciate the information more than you think. And I mean that, Steve, as well. A lot of times we talk about things and you know what's going on, and sometimes we don't get that information. But being able to hear that on short notice, I know it's hard for you because you got other things you got to do too, but it's really helpful because we deal with a lot of people, as you do, and that a little differently, and so thanks.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Okay, I'm impressed that everybody stayed. And then I'd like to acknowledge also Brett, our Planning Commission Chair. But with that, Council, it's a pretty long meeting. Are you ready to leave yet? If so, I'll entertain a motion.
I want to go. And I enter a motion, we leave.
Motion to adjourn. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. It was, I appreciate, again, all the information that was shared tonight.